Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 297, Strickland versus Duplessis. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as usual, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
Doing good, man. It's pay-per-view week. That's always extra exciting to me. So, yeah, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It is, in fact, the UFC's first pay-per-view offering of 2024. The UFC is back in one of its favorite stops outside of the US, or even outside of its home base of Las Vegas. It's back in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, specifically at the Scotiabank Arena. Give me your general letter grade or take the temperature of this 12-fight card. How do you feel about it?
It's okay. C plus maybe. The main event, if you asked me a year and a half ago that Sean Strickland and Dricus Duplessis was fighting at UFC 297, I would have guessed that it was a better chance of it being a prelim fight than being the main event. Now, credit to both these guys. Obviously, they both had gone on incredible runs, and they're both coming off the biggest wins of their career. Obviously, Strickland the champion. It's just not expected. I will say the UFC has done a really good job of, I mean, the promo they did at the fight night, the Ankalaev Walker card, I thought it was one of the best promos I've seen. It was really, really good. I think there's a line, and I actually see both guys' sides. So the big promotion thing that's going on right now is, you know, the abuse of Sean Strickland, the abuse he got from his father, and then did Duplessis go too far? Now, I understand Duplessis' take. Like, don't be a trash talker if you can't take it back. Don't be like a brash guy too. Like, you're not just like the playful talking trash and then like, oh, you went too far. Like, that's not Strickland. Strickland's like, yeah, I mean, he went after like Ian Gary's wife and shit. Like you crossed the line yourself. So I get it from Duplessis. That said, because someone does something that they shouldn't do doesn't mean that you should also do it. So, you know, the two wrongs don't make a right.
Well, yeah, neither of them came across like sounding like a grown-up here.
Yeah. So
like it sounded like two 8th graders like arguing whose fault it was that they got in the fight at recess. Well, he did this first, so I did it back. Yeah.
So I saw the Theon, what is his name? Theon Vaughn. I don't
Theo
really
Vaughn?
follow. Yeah,
Theo Vaughn.
Yeah, sorry. I watched too much Game of Thrones. Added random ends at the end.
My name is Reek.
Yeah. Theo Vaughn there. I saw his interview. I mean, it was some hard stuff, man. That guy deals with some demons. That sold me on this fight too. It definitely brought me more interest in Sean Strickland. Seeing that side of Sean Strickland attracts people. Like, realness attracts people. You know, like take off your mask for a second and show you real you. That attracts people. So, because of that, this is going to get a higher grade than I think it deserves. So that's why I give like a C plus. The rest of the cut's kind of bad.
I agree on a lot of points, and 100% co-sign on everything you said right there. As someone who really, my first job in MMA was interviewing fighters. I just did piles and piles of interviews, and you've done some incredible interviews. You definitely crave the realness. Like, if somebody had asked me my first week at Sherdog, hey, do you want to interview Conor McGregor, or do you want to interview random fighter 4th from the top on, you know, this upcoming card? Why would I want to talk to McGregor? He's going to give the same answers he gives everyone else. He's always on. Like, you're getting almost no chance of any realness. Same for John Jones. Same for George St. Pierre. Like, those would be bucket list things, but
that's exactly
completely agree.
That's it.
Like,
that's it. Just to tell your friends you interviewed these guys.
Yeah, but Strickland humanized himself, for better or worse. Like, sometimes when somebody shows you what they got inside, it's not all pretty. Sean Strickland is absolutely one of those. But it's not an act with him. Like, completely agree. And I caught the high points, like transcripts of the Theo Vaughn interview, and yeah, it's raw stuff. If he weren't so brash, it would make him a much more sympathetic figure. I mean, think of somebody with a similarly terrible background who chooses to kind of be mild-mannered and button down. Like think of like Rose Namajunas when
exactly.
Joanna Jędrzejczyk's getting in her face about stuff. But
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know,
And Joanna didn't. She didn't cross the line.
No,
Joanna didn't. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she's just being Joanna.
Yeah.
But you know, these don't have to be great people. Like we like them not to be criminals because we want them to make it to their fights, but they don't have to be the kind of person you'd bring to tea with grandma.
Oh I'm not a snowflake over here.
No, not at all.
Just me. All the shit that I'm sold. Like if you told me this a year and a half ago, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's a decent fight. Like, but I wouldn't have been sold. I'm sold. So the jumping in the crowd, like, I would have wished that Gilbert Burns' kids wasn't right there, but I still love shit.
Even Gilbert afterwards was like, no, I knew it was coming. I kind of got like the wink and the nudge and kind of got out of the way. So presumably, like the good dad he is, he got his kids out of the way first. You know, carried Herbert out, and then we're all good. As far as this card goes, I agree. The main event is compelling, and it's compelling as a fight. It's now compelling as a story. That sort of makes up for the co-main event. We'll get to it when we get to it, but the women's bantamweight title fight between Raquel Pennington and Mayura Bueno Silva is rough stuff. Aside from that, it's like south of those two title fights, this would be if this were a fight night card with some other headliner, like say Strickland and Duplessis isn't for the title, I'd be like, this is one of the best fight night cards ever because they've got that geographical appropriateness to it. There are 12 fights on this card. The only 3 fights that don't have a Canadian are the 2 title fights where you got to book who you've got, and Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev, which is far enough up the ladder that it might be a title eliminator, and there isn't a Canadian that far up the rankings in that division right now. The other 9 fights, each of them has a Canadian, and each of them has exactly 1 Canadian. So the crowd in Toronto is likely to be very invested in these fights. But it's not the fireworks that we'll probably see at UFC 299, 300, 301, because the UFC is trying to stack 300. Stuff's going to spill either way. But hey, it's the first pay-per-view of the new year. It's what we've got, and some fights is better than no fights. Any general thoughts on this one before we jump in?
I mean, like I said, the rest of the cards, like Alan Evloev is dope. I mean, Malott getting a test against Magny, like those that's good too. But generally speaking, it's not the best card.
No. First up on the UFC 297 undercard is a men's flyweight matchup between Malcolm Gordon and Jimmy Flick. Gordon, the 33-year-old Canadian, in fact, Toronto area native, is 14-7 overall. He is 2-4 since joining the UFC as a former flyweight champ in Canada's TKO promotion. He's on a 2-fight losing streak, though in his defense, those have come against Muhammad Mokaev and Jake Hadley, 2 of the hotter prospects in the division. He fought most recently last March. That was the Hadley fight, got knocked out in like 60 seconds. So he's looking to bounce back from that 2-fight losing streak. He's looking to do it against Flick, who is on a 2-fight losing streak of his own. 33-year-old Oklahoman, 16-7 overall, 1-2 since joining the UFC out of the 4th season of Dana White's Contender Series. It's worth noting, though, that he debuted all the way back in December of 2020, so 3 years ago, got a spectacular first-round submission of Cody Durden, retired shortly thereafter, and didn't come back until the beginning of last year. Since coming back, he's 0-2 with TKO losses to Charles Johnson and Alessandro Costa. The most recent of those, the Costa fight, was at UFC on ESPN, Vettori versus Cannonier back in June. He got pounded out on the ground in the second round. So he's looking to snap a losing streak as well and secure his position in the division. Keith, I'm going to quiz you on some of these odds tonight because for the most part, the lines are pretty close. Your favorite in this fight is -130. Your underdog +110. Who are they?
Oh, geez, I have no idea. I mean, Jimmy Flicks looks terrible lately, but Malcolm Gordon is I mean, this is low level. I go the hometown guy as a favorite. Gordon?
You are correct. Gordon, -130, Flick +110. I mean, and I think both of us generally shy away from trying to suggest when fighters should retire, should walk away. unless they're just very obviously compromising their future health, let alone a fighter who at the time was on the right side of 30. But there's a good argument to be made that Jimmy Flick could have just walked away after armbarring Cody Jourdain like he tried to, and that would have been his Rudy moment. Like, Rudy he's never going to be an All-American. He was never going to play in the NFL. So just going out on your teammates' shoulders after playing like one game, what was your best possible outcome? Maybe that was it for Jimmy Flick, because since coming back, it's been a rough look for him. Obviously, he burst onto the scene because he got the flying triangle on Cody Jourdain. But what we've learned since then is that going for a flying triangle might be his highest percentage takedown. He is basically the modern scaled down version of Dustin Hazlett. He has some dazzling submission ability, but between that, he's not very athletic. He's not very physically strong. He has terrible striking defense and just has a tough time getting the fight to the ground in a situation that suits him. Like, his fights have gone to the ground against Johnson and Costa, but not until he was already in serious trouble. And while Gordon is probably a step down even from Johnson and Costa, if he wants to stay on the feet and just piece flick up at range, I think he's going to be able to. I'm leaning Gordon via decision here. Just I see Flick either just testing his luck on the feet and kind of getting marked up with body kicks at range, getting jabbed up, or him going for low percentage takedowns and really getting mauled. Maybe not a finish, but just a kind of a one-sided decision loss for Flick. Tell me if you feel different.
Well, I mean, the nice thing about Flick coming back was not just him coming back, but how the rest of the UFC roster, all the flyweights that walked in Dana White's office and dropped their gloves on his desk and said, "I want Jimmy Flick to take my place." that's added to the Jimmy Flick. That's an old school Rudy reference for all you young hipsters. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Like in the 50s, there was "I am Spartacus." In the 80s, there was "I want Rudy to take my place." In 2022, we had we probably had like Davis and Figueiredo saying, "I want Jimmy Flick to come back."
Well, they all wanted somebody they could beat. I mean, Flick looks so bad lately. I mean, he looks so flat against Charles Johnson. He isn't an athlete at all. He on the feet, he's a very unorthodox striker. A bit of like a Tim Elliott style where he's throwing from weird angles. Defensively, he's pillars, which I hate. A lot of kicks, but he doesn't check like kicks. I mean, Alessandro Costa butchered his legs. He throws weird shots to try to close the distance where he can kind of use his size and grind. And he will wrestle, but he's not like a drive through your hips guy, get to the second level. He needs to set up his takedowns. He just dives right in. Will pull guard. If he gets the fight to the ground, he obviously he's good at scrambling. I mean, you compare him to Dustin Hazlett. I think that's a perfect comparison. He's a big submission threat. He chains submission attempts together. He'll run a gauntlet of different sub attempts, but he'll rush takedowns that aren't there. Now, his favorite, like he loves the Von Flue choke, but he'll play BJJ instead of working back to his feet, which I don't like. Malcolm Gordon, good athlete, getting up there in age for a flyweight, but fights with a lot of pressure, good volume, quick hands, nice power. The problem is he's always been a striking defense. He's a little too hittable. I mean, you go back to the Hadley fight. Hadley crushed him to the body. He can get the fight to the ground. He's a decent grappler. Now he isn't a great wrestler. I mean, the dude's Canadian, so I mean, there's only this George St. Pierre, and then everybody else who tries to wrestle in Canada.
Okay, just like the whole legend of George St. Pierre saying, "Hey, maybe I'll try out for the Olympic team in wrestling," only worked because he was in Canada.
Yeah,
if he said that in America, like we would have all just laughed.
Yeah, he's not making he's not making the American team, or
he could still make the UK team today.
Yeah. I don't know. UK is probably better than Canada at this point. Yeah. If he gets the fight to the ground, he's not the most explosive guy. So he's kind of more of a grinder's mindset to get it there. But he is a submission. He's got 6 subs himself. I'd be surprised he subs Jimmy Flick unless Jimmy Flick gasses out. He's usually wins by just outworking his foe and then finding a sub in an opening. But a big issue is he's a weaker defensive wrestler. So this is a guy that Flick might be able to get the fight to ground. This is a bad fight. I mean, both guys are low-level flyweights. Gordon, I think, has the advantage on the feet, while Flick is the better submission artist. I'm going to go with the hometown guy. I'm going to go with Gordon. Flick has looked so bad. I mean, he retired, and since retiring, he hasn't looked motivated at all. I say Gordon stops enough of Flick's takedown attempts and lands some shots on the feet. I want to take a finish, but I'm going to say that Gordon just outscores him and he wins by decision.
Next up on the UFC 297 undercard is a welterweight matchup between Yohan Lainesse and Sam Patterson. Lainesse, the 31-year-old Canadian, is 9-2 overall. He's 1-2 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought most recently last February at the Muniz versus Allen fight night, where he got tapped out late in the first round by Mike Malott, who appears further up this card. He'll look to get back into the win column against Patterson. Patterson, 27-year-old Englishman, is 10-2-1 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. He won on the Contender Series, got knocked out by Yanal Ashmaz in his UFC debut at UFC 286 last March. Both his Contender Series appearance and his UFC debut were at lightweight. Here he's moving up to welterweight. Speaking strictly by the eyeball test, that's an appropriate move because he is an absolutely gigantic dude. I mean, he's a gigantic dude even for welterweight, 6'4", not skinny, but we'll see if his luck changes in this new division. Your favorite in this fight, Keith, is -140. Your underdog is +110. Who are they?
I'm not very high on either guy. Lainesse is the favorite.
You are correct. Stick with the homers, looks like, and you're going to do all right. You're 2-0 so far tonight. Lainesse -140, Patterson +110. You kind of answered this question for me already, but if either of these guys is in the UFC and still cashing checks 2 years from now, which one of them is it? Like, is there any kind of upside in either of these guys at 170?
And Patterson's the anybody who has like a distinct advantage in one area, to me, is always kind of that answer. And when a guy's like 9 feet tall, I'll go with that. So I'll go with Patterson, but I'm not predicting that for either one. I don't think either one of these guys is any good.
Who wins this fight and how?
So Patterson, like I said, like what did you say, 6'4"?
Yeah.
I don't. Anyone time when someone's really tall for a division, I'm always okay with them moving up. That said, I hope his move up to welterweight is simply because he couldn't, struggling to make weight. Not that I got knocked out. Oh, I have to move up. Like, cause I don't think that was the case. Like, cause he's going to get hit even harder at lightweight. Excuse me, welterweight.
Sure.
He's a long length guy even at welterweight. Not a great athlete. The reason why he got knocked out is because he's flat-footed. He stands very tall, chin high in the air, backs his head straight up in the center line. That's why he got knocked out. Now, he does some good things. He works behind a jab. He doubles it up. He throws straight shots down the pipe. I like his straight right. He makes the mistake of sometimes leading with an uppercut, which is super dangerous, which I definitely don't like. I'm also obviously basically coming off that knockout. I'm worried about his durability, and even his Contender Series when he was hurt in that fight. Kicks are a good part of his game, obviously, but he throws a lot of naked kicks, so he's open to that. He can use his size and grind in the clinch, but when he tries to get the fight to the ground, he's got good top control if he gets the fight to the ground, but he struggles to get there because he's not much of an offensive wrestler, and he's a weak defensive wrestler. Now, if he gets the fight to the ground, he's got some submissions, particularly using those long arms to guillotines. He likes that. Lainesse, he's not tall like Patterson, but he's a bigger guy for the weight class too. So, he's a pretty strong guy. He moves well. He's a guy that he likes to keep his distance, work from the outside, and then suddenly crash in the pocket in a flurry and land some big shots. He's got good power. I mean, he really steps into his shots. He's got 6 KOs. I go back to when he dropped, crushed Gabe Breen, and dropped Gabe Breen in a fight. The problem is he makes the mistake of loading up, and credit to DC. He pointed out, I think it was his last fight, that he actually he really telegraphs his right hand. Like every time he's going to throw it, he almost shows it. He loves the brawl. He wants to get in the pocket and throw some haymakers. But the problem is he overthrows shots, leaves them open to be countered. I like his kicking game. He goes some hard kicks, but he has so many defensive issues. He backs straight up. He pillars almost to the point where he's turtling up to defend shots, which I hate. I like that he will look to wrestle, but he's definitely not a wrestler by any means. He kind of gets out of position, reaches without any setups. Once he gets on top, he needs to improve his top control. Doesn't have a single submission in his career, and he has gassed out in the past, which I don't like. And I'm not high on either guy. I think both are very low-level talents. I'm going to go with the power Lainesse. Like, I still don't – yeah, I do like Patterson moving up, just to not having the weight cut as much. But show me that he can fix those defensive issues. Lainesse, I'm not big on him, but he can still land one big haymaker, and I say he does. I say he knocks out Patterson in the first round.
I definitely couldn't have said it any better, but I'm really not going to try very hard to say it any different, because I see it the same way you do. I'm not super high on either guy. I think Lainesse's absolute ceiling would be to settle in as kind of a second or third tier action fighter who wins enough to stay on roster and picks up a bonus every other fight or so. That would be his like top level aspiration here, where Patterson, he's yet to show he even belongs. And while both of them have plenty of flaws, if Lainesse loses to Patterson, it's probably just by diving straight into a guillotine. He'd have to make a pretty bad mistake, I think, for Patterson to have a straightforward route to victory here, whereas Patterson gets clocked with punches in just about every fight, and Lainesse throws plenty of them as hard as he possibly can. Telegraphed or not, I think one of them is going to find Patterson. He's just so bad defensively on the feet. I'd love to be different than you, just to be contrarian, but I see it the same way. I think Lainesse finds Patterson's chin in the first round, and this thing is over, and maybe Lainesse picks up the first of that string of every other fight bonuses here. Because if there's one thing we learned at UFC Vegas 84, it is that really tall guys get knocked out spectacularly. Next up at UFC 297 is a women's flyweight matchup between Jasmine Jasudavicius and Priscila Cachoeira. Jasudavicius, the 34-year-old Ontario native, is 9-3 overall. She's 3-2 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. She is coming into this fight off of a loss. She went 2-1 last year, but she lost her last appearance of 2023. It was a unanimous decision against Tracy Cortez at the Grasso versus Shevchenko Noche UFC. So she's looking to get out of Mexico, sports-wise speaking, and into Canada, and she's going to look to do it against Cachoeira. 35-year-old Brazilian, 12-5 overall, 4-5 in the UFC. She lost her last time out as well, getting armbarred in the third round by Miranda Maverick. Prior to that, she had been on a 2-fight win streak over Ji-Yeon Kim and Ariane Lipski. Her presence on this card is just the UFC testing whether the Toronto crowd is paying attention, since she is fairly infamous for her fight with Gillian Robertson, Canadian, also on this card, where she lost by first round submission after blatantly eye gouging Robertson several times. I won't bother to ask you who's the favorite here, because Jasudavicius is the biggest favorite on the card. I will say, how big a favorite is she? Like, what's the minus?
You said she's the biggest on the card, so I'm going to go pretty high. Negative 480.
Minus 400. Biggest favorite on the card. I mean, she's around minus 450 on some. Minus 400 would be a decent value on her right now. Cachoeira coming back at plus 320. Here, I mean, you and I will probably say it every time for as long as she's in the UFC. Priscila Cachoeira shouldn't be in the UFC. If Paul Daly, a top 15 fighter at the time, got a forever death penalty from being in the UFC for barely grazing Josh Koscheck after the bell, Priscila Cachoeira
should have been the Koscheck.
Yeah, dude, everybody wanted to punch Koscheck.
Yeah.
Cachoeira should have gotten fucking deported for what she did to Robertson, yet here she still is. That's the bad news. The good news is she's turned into an okay flyweight. It's women's flyweight, so it's one of the thinner, more wide open divisions, but she's 4-5 in the UFC, and she's beating the really bad ones. The win over Ariane Lipski is continuing to age well, but she's got her limitations. She's not as psychotically aggressive as she was when she got to the UFC, but she's still pretty aggressive. Not a great athlete, but strong. Just wants to brawl it out on the feet. Her ground game is still pretty deficient. I think that all spells bad news against Jasudavicius. Jasudavicius is bigger. She's not a great athlete either, but she's at least as strong, and she actually is a well-trained wrestler with good technique. It's just such a joy to see a women's flyweight that has a way to get the fight to the ground other than the headlock throw. I see this being a Jasudavicius fight rather than the Cachoeira fight, because if it's a Cachoeira fight, it'll be more fun. But a Jasudavicius fight is going to involve her taking Cachoeira down with relative ease. Like, I could see her being like, she's 5 for 8 on her takedowns tonight, almost half the fight worth of top control, but never really threatening with a submission, just sort of busting her up with mild ground and pound, doing enough work to win rounds. Give me Jasudavicius in a decision here, but I almost hope I'm wrong, just because it'll be a more fun fight if Cachoeira can stay upright and tries to brawl it out with her.
Yeah, you already mentioned about the eye gouging, so I'll move on there. I mean, Cachoeira, yeah, I think all right is a good way to describe her skills. It's like when your wife like asks you how she looks and something that you don't like, but you're just like, you look okay, and you're like, right, and you're like, it's silly, like you start regret. Like, no, I mean,
Priscila, that pair of jeans, Cachoeira. All right.
So, I mean, she's a pressure striker, constantly moving forward, but she struggles to cut off the cage and tends to chase a little bit. If she only gets a better athlete, if she gets in the pocket, she unloads some big shots. I mean, that's the big part of the game. She throws haymakers, tons of hooks. Sometimes she can kind of just duck and throw, but she's shown she has power in the division. I mean, she's knocked out Shayna Dobson, Gina Mazzani, Ariane Lipski. I mean, that Lipski fight has aged really well since then. But despite her power, I mean, that's really it. I mean, her striking defense is still bad. Her hands are really wide. She drops her hands. She keeps her chin high in the air. She will sneak in a takedown, but she hardly ever wrestles. Like, she hardly looks for wrestling, but she actually has the skills to get there. If she does, she's a top side grappler. But, like, she's not some wizard. I mean, she gets smoked on the ground by Gillian Robertson. She gets subbed by Miranda Maverick. She's a weak defensive wrestler. So, Jasudavicius, she's a big, strong woman for the weight class, long and lengthy, very, very physical. I mean, you see her, she's got, like, arm muscles, and you can see her, shoulder muscles. She like, it's just like that, like, tall woman, like, strong physique, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of like Bo Nickel. Like a female Bo Nickel.
Yeah, like a female Bo Nickel. There you go. Get out early. She likes to bully her opponents in the clinch. She likes to march down her opponents and get them in the back foot where she's going to try to get the fight to the ground. When she's striking, good volume, nice jab. Does have some defensive issues. Keeps her chin too high in the air. She's similar to what I just talked about. Cachoeira. She struggles with, like, better athletes. Like, she really struggled with the speed and timing of Tracy Cortez. She was also hurt to the body in that fight. She will clinch when pressured, and that's her best thing. She just uses her height to kind of batter with knees inside against the cage. She likes a kind of grimy, grueling fight. When she tries to get the fight to the ground, she likes upper body locks and trips. Good top control. I mean, Miranda Maverick couldn't get her off her. Mean ground and pound, though she's not much of a submission threat. Yeah, I'm not surprised that Jasudavicius was a huge favorite. I thought this was the easiest fight to pick of the whole card. So I think Vegas is right about this one. I think Cachoeira just marches forward, and every time she does, Jasudavicius just grabs her, takes her down over and over again. I think she batters her on the ground with ground and pound. I say Jasudavicius wins an absolute blow. I think we might have some 10-8 rounds on that too.
We head now to the strawweight division and a matchup between Gillian Robertson and Polyana Viana. Robertson, the 28-year-old Canadian, is 12-8 overall. She is 9-7 since joining the UFC out of season 26 of The Ultimate Fighter. Notably, she is 1-1 since dropping the strawweight. Her entire first portion of her career was conducted at flyweight. She's decided a little over a year ago to drop to 115 pounds thus far with mixed results, but good enough that she has chosen to stick with it. She armbarred Piera Rodriguez last April in her strawweight debut, came back in June and dropped a unanimous decision to Tabitha Ricci. She will try to turn things back around and get into the win column against Viana. 31-year-old Brazilian, 13-6 overall, 4-5 since joining the UFC as a former Jungle Fight strawweight champ. She is coming into this fight off a loss as well. She got tapped out in the second round by Jasmine Lucindo at UFC on ESPN Luque versus Dos Santos back in August. Odds on this one, your favorite is -225, your underdog +175. Who are they, Keith?
I will say the favorite is Robertson.
You are correct. 4 fights, 4 Canadian favorites thus far. Gillian Robertson, -225 here. Polyana Viana, +175. Okay, so Gillian Robertson, to me, was very much a known quantity as a flyweight. She was in that, well, attractive Canadian with dyed red hair category with Randa Marcos, where good grappler without the means to get the fight to the ground a lot of the time, and was probably just going to win one, lose one for a long time. I was intrigued when she decided to drop to 115 pounds because some of her problems were going to be helped there and others weren't. Like, one of her problems is that her striking is ugly. It has no power, and she's not defensively sound. That's not going to be fixed by a change in weight class. But her other problem, that she is a very good grappler who doesn't have the athleticism, strength, or technique to consistently get the fight to the ground, that might have been helped a little bit. It certainly was against Piera Rodriguez, but Rodriguez is very low level. It wasn't against Tabitha Ricci, but Tabitha Ricci is a very strong, athletic 115-pounder, even if she is small. Here against Viana, I don't know if I'm comfortable with Robertson being greater than a 2-1 favorite, but Viana's got some of the same problems. She's a good grappler who's physically kind of thin and willowy and not really. No one would ever refer to Polyana Viana or Gillian Robertson as Diesel. Neither of these women is Diesel. They're not Miranda Maverick and Ariane Carnelossi out there. This is a little bit of a mirror match in some ways, but Robertson has been doing this thing against bigger women than Viana has, in many cases against higher level women than Viana has. There's every possibility that they cancel out and this just turns into an absolutely terrible slap fight on the feet between two women with middling technique and low power. But I hope that is not the case. I hope the fact that they both have poor takedown defense and both kind of want the fight on the ground to mean that we get a ground fight. And I do think that favors Robertson if we get it. Robertson has been partially hampered by the fact that she's a very good grappler, but she's had to operate from her back almost exclusively because, especially at flyweight, if the fight went to the ground, the other woman was on top, and she's good from bottom, but it's just hard to win consistently against good fighters from guard in modern MMA. Here, we might see Robertson end up on top, and she's a good top position grappler too when she can get there. Has always excelled in scrambles. So give me Robertson here in a really fun fight where, again, I hope we get some fun, like, kind of, I hate using this cliched word, chess matches on the ground, and as little as possible of what would otherwise be very ugly striking display. But Robertson by decision for me.
Yeah, I agree that like these girls are both very similar. I mean, you talk about, you said they wouldn't be considered Diesel. They're the ones you go to the gym, like they're not in the squat rack. They're like running on the treadmill, or doing the spin class, something like that. I mean, Gillian Robinson would probably do like a spin class, but like somehow would trip trying to get on the bike because she's such a bad athlete. I mean, she's really weak striking. Every time, she made like it looked like progress against Piera Rodriguez, and then she just struggled with the speed Taveras and get beat up on the feet. Very hittable fighter, lacks head movement. I've said this before, but she almost like turns away from her opponent to avoid strikes. I mean, make no mistake. She wants to close the distance. She wants to get the fight to the ground. She will shoot for takedowns, and she does pretty well turn in the corner. But you mentioned she shoots with no setups. She can be very desperate to get the fight to the ground. She'll try to catch a kick. She'll dive in for a takedown. I've seen her try to like flying arm bars and pull guard and all kinds of stuff. And that ends up on bottom a lot. But she wants to be on top. She's a top side grappler. When she's on top, she's got good control. Kind of like an RDA or something like that, where she's, not the most dynamic grappler, but can hold you down. She did show an ability recently, which I liked, that when she was taken down by Taveras, she did work to get back to her feet instead of just playing BJJ like she normally does. She has a submission threat, though. She's got some slick back takes. She's got 7 subs on her record. Polyana, almost identical. Not a striker, but she has been showing some improvements. She likes to work from distance. She throw this like the same side attack. Like she's very like, she'll throw like right hand over and over again. She has a little bit of power. I mean, she did drop John Yu Fry. Not too much of it. Like, she throws a lot of kicks, but like there's nothing spectacular. She doesn't check leg kicks. She keeps her chin very high in the air. She wants to get the fight to the ground, but also a weak wrestler. Also shoots without a setup. She'll also pull guard. She doesn't have as good of a takedown defense as Gillian Roberts has. And some of that is because she just wants the fight to go to the ground anyways. But she, off her back, is more of a submission threat than Gillian Robertson. I mean, she caught Emily Whitmire in submission. She caught Mallory Martin in submission. She's pretty good at scrambling. Though she will play a little too much BJJ off her back. I mean, she did it against Taveras trying to get back up. She had no urgency in that fight to get back up to her feet. She's got some sweeps too. She wants to be a grappler, but she's also been submitted. Like, she was submitted by Lucindo in her last fight. She was submitted by Macedo in their fight. If she gets on top, she got some good ground and pound. I mean, I feel like I'm just rambling on and on about a low-level fight. I'm not very high on either. Viana, even though I think she's a weak grappler, might actually be the better striker here. They both want to grapple. I think Robertson's probably the better wrestler. I think we do get a heavy grappling matchup with Robertson being on top for most of the fight, and I think that's gets the advantage. I think as the fight goes on, I think Robertson actually might catch Viana. She was just arm triangle choked. I say it's going to happen again. I say Robertson wins by 3rd round submission by arm triangle choke.
Next up, men's bantamweights take the cage for one of the stranger rematches in UFC history as we get Serhiy Sidey versus Ramon Taveras 2. Sidey, the 27-year-old Canadian, is 10-1 overall. This will be his UFC debut. He won on the Contender Series last September in a first-round TKO. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but this will be his first appearance since then. He'll be taking on Taveras, 30-year-old Floridian, 9-2 overall. He fought on the Contender Series twice last year. He lost in September, came back 5 weeks later, and knocked out Cortavius Romeus in like 30 seconds to punch his ticket to the UFC. These two, of course, fought one another. It was September 5th of last year on week 5 of the Contender Series. It was a all-out brawl on the feet. Both guys were getting their licks in. Sidey hurt Taveras. Referee Kevin McDonald trying to make us forget about his weird stoppage in the Ankalaev versus Kudalaba fight, goes in for an even worse stoppage here, as everybody, including the winning fighter, was confused when he stopped it. Basically, Dana White and the Contender Series crew made the best of it that they could. They gave Sidey a UFC contract. They brought Taveras back, gave him a second chance. He made the most of that chance, knocking out his opponent in 30 seconds. And here they're making the rematch. It's not really a grudge match. Both guys seem pretty sporting about the whole thing, but the first fight was fun for the 2.5 minutes it lasted. So they're running it back. Apparently, whatever we saw in that 2.5 minutes wasn't enough to really sway the bettors very much, because Sidey is a minus 165 favorite, Taveras around plus 130 as the underdog, and that's almost identical to what it was for their Contender Series appearance. So everyone just kind of shrugs, and we do this thing again. Keith, tell me who you see winning this one. I mean, I'm not even going to ask you if you see top 10 upside in either of these guys, because this is men's bantamweight.
Yeah.
And Mario Bautista just won a 6th fight in a row, and he might be in the top 10 now.
Yeah. Like it's higher, much higher level guys.
I'll say this: both of these guys have the kind of knockout power that we used to think 135 pounders didn't have. Should at least be fun. Who you got?
Yeah, I think both guys are promising guys. I agree with what you said about the stoppage. Terrible stoppage by Kevin McDonald. He jumped in way too early. Not even one of those were like, well, better early than late, or in that pendulum. I mean, the guy was clearly fell down, was reacting to the shots coming next. Sidey, you know, what I've seen of these guys, pretty well-rounded. He's a kickboxer. He works behind a power jab, throws straight punches down the pipe. Everything stays loose and inside. He has a high guard defense. I like that he steps in elbows. He actually did that against Taveras in their fight in the Contender Series. I saw a fight against I can't remember the guy's name. He ripped the body, dropped the guy with a body shot, then finished up with knees later on. He's got I'd say plus power. He throws a lot of kicks, but he does throw naked leg kicks, which I don't like. Keeps his chin a little too high in the air. He will go for takedowns. Definitely not a wrestler, but he gets on top, strong ground and pound. I haven't seen too much of his takedown defense or his submission defense, so I'm going to kind of just pass on those. His opponent Taveras, southpaw pocket boxer, good head movement, slip and rip guy. He loves to brawl. His last fight, he got like a rematch. Sorry, this is a rematch, but he had like a redemption fight on the Contender Series, and it was like it didn't last long, but it was fun as hell as it lasted. They just stayed in the pocket and threw down. The guy's got fast hands, but he can crack. Got some big power. You check out his fight against Crazy Horse Bennett. I mean, his knockout.
Damn it! I should have gone first because I wanted to talk about that, but no, hit me.
Oh, it's a great knockout. I mean, Bennett just Bennett completely dies. Like his soul is ripped out of him on the feet, and just like. You see the off switch just get hit. The way he fell, it felt like one of those Christmas blow up doll things you have in the front lawn, and then you like
turn off the air.
Yeah, it's late, and you pull it out and just I think that's how Crazy Horse fell. So the guy really steps in his shots. I haven't seen too much of his ground, but he has 3 subs on his record, so I like that. Their first fight, I mean, it was really quick, but before being dropped, Taveras was doing well. I thought he was getting the better of the exchanges at first. In fairness, that's not fair because, it was such a quick fight. I like Taveras. I mean, he was blasting Sidey, and I just keep picturing Sidey throwing a naked leg kick and Taveras catching him. I'm going to say Taveras evens the score. I'm going to say Taveras lands a first-round knockout.
I definitely should have gone first because first thing I was going to point out is Ramon Taveras knocking out Charles Crazy Horse Bennett in a hotel ballroom was less than a year ago. That was March 2023. I remember saying a few years ago on our show about Serhiy Spivak when he joined the UFC, of like, if you beat Tony Lopez and Travis Fulton in 2 of your last 3 fights, you were not UFC ready. I was getting ready to serve up something similar about Ramon Taveras. Like, if a recent stoppage of Charles Bennett is on your reel that got you to the Contender Series, you may not be ready for prime time. But then I was going to flip that around by picking him in this fight because, yeah, Sidey beat Taveras, and if the stoppage hadn't come, who knows? Maybe he would have actually finished him 5 or 10 seconds later anyway. But before then, it's not like he was outclassing him. It wasn't like, yeah, it was a wild exchange and Sidey hit that shot because he was just more composed. It wasn't like that. It's just he happened to land. If these guys fight 10 times, it might end in 10 first-round knockouts and they go 5-5 or 6-4 and something. They're both wild men, but I think of the two, Taveras might have better one-shot power. And you pointed out Sidey's propensity for throwing naked leg kicks that leave him wide open for a counter up top. I'm with you. Give me Taveras by first round knockout. Sidey by first round knockout. Wouldn't surprise me either. The only thing that would surprise me is if this thing goes the distance. But call that our first unanimous upset pick of the night. And by MMA math, Ramon Taveras is better than Vanderlei Silva.
Okay, you did. Oh, yeah, because Charles Bennett knocked out Vanderlei. I was wondering. I'm trying to remember. I actually tried doing an interview with Charles Bennett once. He like gave me his phone number, and I called him, and I think it was
That phone had already been disconnected. What did it work?
No. It was like I asked for him, and then like some lady. I think I'm trying to remember. I want to say like some lady answered. It was like some side chick of his, and then he's just like, call back like Tuesday or some shit. And I call back Tuesday, and he answers. He has no idea who I am, and he's like, I think he thought I was like his parole officer or some shit, and then like I could hear all this like shit going on in the background, and he's on the front porch, and he's like like forgets he's on the phone with me, and I could hear like TV playing, and oh, what a fucking guy! Like, what do you think Charles Bennett? We should do this on that. What do you think Charles Bennett is doing right now? There's no way he's like, bench. Yeah, there's no way he's not freaking high.
Yeah, he's what a delightful train wreck of a man.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, he's like, there's a better chance. Like, all right, so it's 10 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, East Coast.
Yeah,
he's what, Miami guy, right?
Yeah.
So 10 o'clock his time. Mm-hmm. There's a better chance of him being in a jail cell right now than him being in bed. like yeah, I gotta get up early in the morning. Let me go to bed.
Yeah. Like, I mean, if he's in bed, there's a 50-50 chance there's like a steel toilet he can see from where he is.
That's right.
Oh, that's terrible, and I'm completely leaving it in. It continues to be Canada versus the world on the UFC 297 prelims as Charles Jourdain takes on Sean Woodson in a featherweight feature. Jourdain, the 28-year-old Quebecois, is 15-6-1 overall. He is 6-5-1 since joining the UFC as a former 2-division champ in Canada's TKO promotion. He's on a 2-fight win streak, those being a decision win over Kron Gracie last May and a first-round guillotine choke of Ricardo Ramos last September at UFC Fight Night Fizzy versus Gamrot. He will look to make it 3 in a row and make waves towards becoming more than just another exciting fighter at featherweight against Woodson. Woodson, 31-year-old St. Louis, Missouri native, is 10-1-1 overall. He's 4-1-1 since joining the UFC out of season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series. He's on a 4-fight unbeaten streak since getting tapped out by Julian Erosa, goodness, now over 3 years ago. He fought most recently last August at UFC on ESPN, Sandhagen versus Font, where he had an absolute carousel of potential opponents. I think he literally had 4 opponents announced in 3 weeks. It ended up being the UFC re-signing Dennis Buzukja. Buzukja showed up incredibly, missed weight by only half a pound, and was pretty competitive, sort of competitive, in a unanimous decision loss to Woodson. So Woodson at least does come out of that with a W. Here, he actually gets to fight his scheduled opponent that he prepared for the whole time. But is he the favorite? Keith, your favorite is -180. Your underdog +145 here. Who are they?
That's wrong either way. The line should be much closer. Yeah, I'm going to say Woodson's the favorite.
I'm sorry. It continues to be all Canada.
Yeah.
Jourdain is -180.
Canada down. I got my favorite Canadian just snuck up the stairs right now, trying to not make any noise. Right in front of me, looking beautiful as always. I'd pull her on air right now, but she wouldn't want to.
Yeah. Mrs. Shillan still undefeated. Yes. Queen of the Shillan household. I like this fight. It's one that, I mean, men's featherweight is another one like men's bantamweight where we will always say, and you kind of brought this idea out, draw any 2 names out of the top 20 or 25, and you're probably going to have a competitive fight, and you're probably going to have a good fight. Here's a matchup I never would have dreamed up, mostly because I have to remind myself they're even in the same weight class. But as soon as they announce it, I'm like, I like this. Jourdain he's starting to calm down a little bit. You and I right now are basically 24 hours removed from talking about Johnny Walker in the wake of his most recent loss. And, we previewed it before that. And we had a little talk on the preview about fighters who come in just wild and with seemingly no game plan, and how some of them successfully tone it down to where they become, they stay exciting, but don't needlessly throw fights away. The difference between Johnny Walker and Michel Pereira right now or something. Jourdain is headed in that general direction. Like the Air Jourdain nickname, yeah, it's silly, but at least he earns it by doing a lot of flying stuff. But he's become a guy who, he is a plus athlete. He uses that to his best advantage, but without gassing himself out too badly, without leaving himself open defensively. As he showed in the Ramos fight, he is capable of quick strike offense in the submission realm as well. It's not all just high kicks and flying knees and spinning elbows. I don't know how well that works against Woodson. Woodson is a guy, this shouldn't be working at the UFC level. He is on the short list of the most oversized fighters just by the eyeball test for his division in any division in the UFC. He's a 6'2" featherweight who, he has a big upper body, like broad shoulders, just his upper body is short because he is all legs and arms. Like he's got to have one of the longest inseams in the UFC. And with that, he operates as a boxer. He's one of the prettier pure boxers in the division. He will kick, like he's got some nasty kicks. His front kicks up the middle that he uses as kind of a secondary jab. Like, he has his regular jab, which is great. And then his teep kick up the middle is kind of this is my loaded for bear, my elephant gun jab, because it's going to stop you and it's going to make you want to throw up when it hits your midsection. They're very effective, but this guy should be a takedown dummy for everybody, and he really hasn't been. He should have the worst gas tank imaginable, and he really doesn't. It's remarkable to me that a guy this big, who must have the kind of weight cut he does, is able to throw as good a volume as he is for competitive 3-round fights. I keep waiting for this to not work, for all the wheels to fall off the wagon, and it really hasn't yet. Here, Woodson is the underdog, and I kind of like him in this fight. Funny thing is, Jourdain has not really distinguished himself as a wrestler, offensively or defensively, but he's strong and fast enough that I think he could probably just crash the pocket, drop levels, and pick Woodson up and put him down. But I don't think he's going to. I think he's going to try to do Charles Jourdain things. And against somebody with, the size and kind of long-range weapons that Woodson has, I think he's going to be stuck on the outside quite a bit. I think this turns into a Sean Woodson fight where the sniper nickname really sticks. You think, okay, yeah, sniper. He's not a one-shot, one-kill guy. It's more of like a paintball sniper. Or ow, hey, that hurt. Man, I'm glad I got goggles on. Yeah. But I think Woodson frustrates Jourdain, and we might get our first Canadian in the L column of the night. I'm calling the upset here. Woodson by decision in a really fun fight where Jourdain just isn't able to do anything spectacular, and Woodson is the guy winning the fight from minute to minute, round to round, because he's coming forward, he's throwing more strikes, he's keeping Jourdain on the back foot, and Jourdain just never really gets comfortable.
This is a dope fight. This is probably the fight of the prelims I'm most interested in. Definitely be most interested in the winner moving forward, because it'd be a pretty good streak for either guy. Woodson is, like, you talk about his height and everything. He's beyond huge. I met him in person, and
he's the same height as Randy Brown, and he kind of looks like Randy Brown would if he tried to cut to 145.
Yeah, no shit. If Randy Brown got stuck on a deserted island or some shit. I met him in Boston a couple years ago, and we were talking to each other after interviews and stuff. We started walking next to each other, and I just damn, dude, I felt so intimidated. Just looking up, they just kept looking and looking. I felt like I was the first time I went to New York City, and I was looking at trying to look at the top of the Empire State Building from the bottom, and I'm standing in the middle of the road,
craning your neck.
Yeah, it's like that that scene I felt like that scene in Sing. You ever seen that movie Sing, the Disney movie?
Yes.
where the guy picks the giraffe and he's like
Yeah.
trying to talk to him and he can't, and then he picks the gorilla.
You can always tell a tourist in St. Louis because they stand in front of Sean Woodson and try to look up at the top of his head.
That's right. Take a picture of them.
It's like, damn, move it, tourist. Hey, Sean.
So yeah, he's a really good striker. Constantly switches stances. Works really well from the outside. He stays very calm and poised. Works behind a very crisp jab. He loves cracking the body. He looks, when you come inside, he starts turning things up inside, looking for uppercuts. I'd say plus power. Doesn't have the power you think he would for someone his size. He throws a lot of kicks because, I mean, it's so easy for him to get a high kick up to your head. The way to beat him is to pressure him and force him to kind of close up, get in the range. You're gonna have to eat some shots coming in, but get inside. He has no issue being forced back and fighting off his back foot and like fighting with his like very Anderson Silva, like putting his back against the cage and kind of have one of those kind of battles. I hate that personally. I think he likes to defend takedowns. Like he enjoys working it. He won't really look for takedowns, but he has been taken down before. His sub-defense needs to improve. I mean, he was submitted by Julian Rosa. You said like you expect him based on his size to kind of slow down and not work for him, his gas tank and everything. That was the one fight where you saw some cracks in it, is the Rosa fight. Jourdain is a high volume striker. I mean, his pace he put against Shane Burgos, I always keep going back to that fight. It was absolutely nuts. Fights out of both stances, though I do prefer him in the southpaw stance. I mean, he's an amazing athlete. Very quick hands, explosive, sharp left hand. I love his lead uppercut, which well, no, I shouldn't say he loves his lead uppercut. I don't love it, especially not against Sean Woodson. I can't even read my own notes. One thing I've seen him, which I love, is he's been throwing. He throws and throws, but he's been throwing to spots instead of just throwing, to hit his opponent, which I really love. But the mistake on that, he overthrows sometimes, which leaves him to be countered. And Woodson's like definitely the guy you have to worry about that. And defense has always been second to him. Like he doesn't care about getting tagged up. He'll throw a flying knee, a flying jump kick or some shit. Hard kicks, especially to the body. He's really slick on the ground. Doesn't get enough credit. I mean, he's a real submission threat. I think he has got 4 subs. 5
now.
5
after
subs.
getting Ramos, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, he was constantly looking for subs against Culibao. He wasn't going to get Culibao with it, but he caught Lando Fanata. He caught Ramos. He's got one of the slickest guillotines I've seen. I mean, he almost caught Burgos a bunch of times with submissions. But he was subbed by Julian Rosa, but I mean, that guy's so underrated. Not the best wrestler. That's the problem. Like he can get the fight to the ground. He will shoot. I think he's the better wrestler than Sean Woodson, definitely. If
he's a Canadian national team level.
Yeah, exactly. Good get-up game off his back and incredible cardio. I think this is a really hard fight to pick. I love Jourdain's output in grappling, but I just also love Woodson's boxing, and then obviously his size is nuts. Man, I don't want to pick against either one. Jourdain to me is one of the most entertaining guys to watch, and Woodson just, if you told me one of these guys was holding a title one day, it would be Woodson for sure. Right? I'm not picking either one of these guys, but if you asked me to, it'd be Woodson. I'm just wondering. I mean, I do think this is a step up for Woodson, and I wonder if he's a front runner a little bit. When times it got a little tough, against Julian Ross. And again, that was a long time ago. He seemed like he found a way out. I think he tags up Jourdain early. I just think that pace that Jourdain's got to put, I don't know if Woodson can contain that pace, especially if Jourdain forces him on his back foot, forces him to wrestle. I think he eventually takes Woodson down. I think Woodson makes a mistake, and I think Jourdain jumps on a guillotine. I say Jourdain catches him in a guillotine. I'm going to say he does in the second round.
Next up at UFC 297, and at least as the card is constituted as of the beginning of fight week, the top prelim is a men's bantamweight matchup between Brad Katona and Garrett Armfield. Katona, the 32-year-old Canadian, is 13-2 overall. He is 3-2 across multiple stints in the UFC. He was released from the UFC over 3 years ago on a 2-fight losing streak. He returned last year, came back with a victory over Cody Gibson to bring himself above 500 in the octagon. He will look to extend that against Armfield. Armfield, 27-year-old St. Louis native, is 9-3 overall. He is 1-1 in the UFC. He made a short notice debut all the way back in July of 2022 against David Onama. That was Onama kind of paying it forward after his own short notice debut. Armfield acquitted himself fairly well on the way to a second round submission loss, then came back last August for his first proper fight in the UFC, knocked out Toshiomi Kazama in the first round. So he's looking to make it 2 wins in a row as well. Your favorite here is minus 180. Your underdog is plus 145. Who are they, Keith?
Nah, Katona.
You are correct. Katona is the favorite, completing the sweep. All 7 Canadians on the 7-fight undercard are the favorites. Katona minus 180, Armfield plus 145. Do you feel like Brad Katona is a different fighter than he was in 2018, 2019? Or is it just he's the same fighter and he's gotten the right matchups, at least thus far? Tell me how you think this fight goes.
A little bit of both. I don't think he should have got cut from the UFC. I think he was one of the guys who got one of these ones like head scratcher that he got cut earlier, and then you have other guys who just stick around forever and ever. I think he fights much different in his last fight than he has in previously. I mean, you look at his run on the Ultimate Fighter. I know you fight differently when you have to fight every like 2.5 weeks, whatever it is, on the Ultimate Fighter show. But I mean, his opponent Cody Gibson in the pre-fight talked about, called him, super boring. He tries, hard trying to stay awake and all this stuff. And then Katona and him just put on one of the Fight of the Year candidates, which I was lucky to be in person. I mean, and Katona's not known for being that kind of action guy. Good output on the feet, tight boxing, throws a lot of combinations against Cody Gibson, throws a lot of hooks. His left hook is probably his best weapon. He likes to go to the body. He doesn't have much power, and he can to overswing his shots. But I mean, in fairness, he broke Cody Gibson's orbital bone at the end of that fight. So, take that for what it's worth. Good kicks to the body. He lacks head movement, and he's been hurt. I mean, he was hurt to the body against Cody Gibson. He typically wants to close the distance and grind. He wants to, which is really funny, being that he's, John Kavanaugh, Conor McGregor team, SPG Ireland guy, because that's not really the game, but he's that guy there. We want to grind and work in the clinch and dirty box. He will wrestle. The best part of his wrestling game is he stays glued to his opponents. Very, going to make you work. And the issue is he's stalled at times, really slowed the fight down, stalled, doesn't really do much. But he has 3 subs on his record. Armfield, not the greatest athlete, but he's super tough. High volume, fast hands, accurate, tight boxing, attacks with combination, really steps into his shots. He likes to work the boxing. I haven't seen too much of his offensive wrestling, but he's a really weak defensive wrestler. And he was subbed by David Onama. When we do these previews, I really try to dig into the fights, and sometimes you got to sacrifice a fight, and doing tape study and Katona usually is put that at the bottom of my list. And if I get to it, I get to it. I kind of feel like this one I didn't do enough. Excuse me. I wish I had more notes on Armfield. Armfield is a better athlete of the two, which is funny considering I said he's a weaker athlete. Katona's not a good athlete at all. But Katona's such a smart fighter. I could just see him using his footwork, keeping the range he wants, throwing kicks from distance. When Armfield gets in the range, Katona starts to wrestle. I just see this happen for 15 minutes. I say Katona wins the decision.
Yeah, I see this one largely the way you do. And I agree. Like Katona, you would think by the eyeball test, he would be the better athlete of the two. I mean, the guy, he basically looks like TJ Dillashaw. But no, he's a grinder who just gets things done by making things miserable for his opponents. If you'd asked me at the end of 2018, coming out of the Ultimate Fighter, I mean, dude, on the Ultimate Fighter, he beat Kyler Phillips and Bryce Mitchell, and he tapped out Bryce Mitchell. Like,
Yeah.
And then he wins his first 2 in the UFC, admittedly against not great competition, even after running into Merab, who is just like a supercharged kind of version of himself. I would have said, this guy might be Canada's top prospect right now. The loss to Hunter Azure has not aged well, but he looked good in Brave CF. He won 4 straight there. He won a title there. And by the time he did, I mean, you could make the argument the Brave CF is the best feeder league right now.
I think it is.
Yeah, it's what LFA was in 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
But yeah, the reason I asked you the question I did to kind of lead into it is that I feel as though he's not a night and day different fighter. He's just a slightly refined, probably very much in his prime version of what he always has been. Like 32 is on the tail end of prime for bantamweight, but it's more like dead center for someone like Katona, that it's never been about fast twitch athleticism anyway. Like, it's just strength and endurance, and if anything, that's better now than it was before. I like Armfield's upside. I agree that he's a flawed fighter, but at 27 and more athletic than he looks, good offensive weapons, he has better upside. Like, I feel like I know what the next 5 years of Katona's run are going to look like. Whereas, if Armfield turns into a top 10 bantamweight for a minute, I won't be that shocked. But here, I think it's all Katona. Armfield, he's not going to be able to keep Katona off him. Even if he stops the takedown, there's only an incremental difference between 90 seconds of ground control or 90 seconds of getting mashed into the fence and trying to scrape a dude off your back using the fence. Like, what these sequences are going to look like. If you're watching this preview right now, you know what I'm talking about. Katona drops levels in the middle of the cage, runs Armfield all the way to the opposite side. Armfield does a good job of wide legging. We get 20 seconds of that where Armfield can't even really go for the elbows, because if he does, Katona's going to tip him over.
That's right.
Then Katona moves around to the back. Armfield plants a hand.
Slides his foot behind his leg. Yeah,
slides his foot behind his leg. Armfield starts like planting his hand so that Katona can't knee him in the head. Then Katona hops on his back. Armfield has to scrape. You know what this is going to look like. And whether it's on the ground or it's on the cage, it's winning Katona the round, mostly because Armfield is 100% in reactive mode. All of the offense, whatever it is coming from Katona. I don't think it's going to be super pretty, but give me Katona by decision here and just expect a lot of those sequences. The 5-fight main card of UFC 297 opens up with a featherweight matchup between Arnold Allen and Movsar Evloev. Allen, the 29-year-old Brit, is 19-2 overall. He's 10-1 in the UFC. That's the good news. The bad news is that he started his UFC run with 10 straight wins. That lone loss came in his last appearance. It was last April in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 44, where he came out on the wrong side of a 5-round unanimous decision against former champ Max Holloway. He will look to bounce back and reaffirm himself as a near future title challenger against Evloev, who is trying to do the exact same thing. 29-year-old Russian out of the tiny Republic of Ingushetia, specifically, perfect 17-0 as a pro, a perfect 7-0 since joining the UFC as a former M1 global bantamweight champ. More on that in a moment. He fought most recently last May at UFC 288, where he took a unanimous decision over Diego Lopez. He faced some surprising amount of adversity in that fight, but since then we've discovered that Diego Lopez is a pretty damn good fighter. Prior to that, he had pretty straightforward unanimous decision wins over Dan Ige and Hakeem Dawodu to confirm himself as a top 15, if not top 10 fighter in this division. Your favorite in this fight is -185. Your underdog +150. Who are they, Keith? No Canadian, so you can't cheat.
Yeah, this is a good one, man. This is the best fight in the card. I think the line should be closer no matter which way. -185, you said?
Yes.
I'm going to say Arnold Allen is the favorite.
Your favorite is Movsar Evloev, -185. Arnold Allen +150 on the comeback.
Wow.
As good as these guys are, and in a division like men's featherweight, I'm always going to take the field over anybody if you ask me if they're a future champ. But
yeah, of course, yeah.
this is about as close as you could get to me saying, hey, whoever wins this fight, if they win it decisively and uncontroversially, I'm high on them as, well, a near future title contender, and maybe if things pan out right, a future champ. And despite that, despite how incredible both of them are, they're both overachievers in a way. Allen, for all he's done, is always overcoming that he's not a super athlete. He's just incredibly smart, skilled, well-rounded, resilient, well-conditioned, all of those things, but not a off-the-charts athlete. Evloev, as incredible as he is, he's small. And he's not Armin Sarukian small, where he's short and he's built like a tank. He's just small. He's a former bantamweight and he looks like it. And despite that, nobody's really been able to make him pay. He's taken on some people that are a lot bigger than him, and it has not helped them. Dan Ige, who's not a big featherweight, was bigger than Evloev. Diego Lopez, Enrique Barzola, Sung Woo Choi, all way bigger than him. It's not mattered at all. One of these guys is going to continue to overachieve. The question for me is whether Evloev thinks his best chances of winning this fight hinge on him keeping it standing or bringing it to the ground. That's kind of what I'm interested in. He's shown incredible offensive and defensive wrestling, but his defensive wrestling in particular is spectacular and fun to watch because he tends to do it just by, I remember one of the first fights that we recapped was him against Mike Grundy in summer of 2020. And Mike Grundy, all jokes about UK wrestling aside, was a UK national team member. He is a very good wrestler. And I said it was like watching someone trying to give a cat a bath. Like, he was able to get him on the ground, but Evloev, just as soon as his butt hit canvas, he was going somewhere. He never conceded the position. It seemed incredibly frustrating for Grundy. You could tell Grundy was getting frustrated by the third round. He was a little tired. He was very upset and discouraged. Like, I don't think he had ever had that done to him, let alone by a guy that was visibly smaller. And Evloev has been very good at scoring takedowns, mostly reactive takedowns. Like, usually he gets his best takedowns when someone's coming in, he knows they're coming in, or he's drawn them in, with what he's doing on the feet. And he's just so quick, he drops levels, he's on their hips in a flash and hauls them down, including against some people with traditionally good takedown defense. I want to see his wrestling against Arnold Allen's, and Allen has no credentials that I know of, but is one of the more MMA effective wrestlers from the UK in MMA right now. But I'm kind of interested to see who is going to want this fight on the ground out of the two of them. If it stays on the feet the whole time, I think they're very evenly matched. Evloev is quicker, probably throws a wider variety of strikes. Allen, bigger, not quite as quick. I think he throws in combination better, a little bit more of a conventional, traditional kickboxer. I'm leaning Evloev here. I think we get some razor close rounds. I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of the fights where, if it's not a split decision, even if it's a unanimous decision, it's one where judges disagree on individual rounds. Give me Evloev to win this one. I think he'll kick it at Allen's legs, kick at his body, successfully fight off takedown attempts if Allen tries to take him down, probably try to avoid clinch situations. One place where I think Allen would have the advantage is if he can force a lot of clinch exchanges against Evloev, because that kind of negates his superior foot speed. It allows him to make Evloev just wear his weight. I think Evloev will be able to avoid those, though, and win very narrowly in a super fun fight to stay undefeated. And we're not talking enough about this guy. If he's 18-0 and he's still a couple weeks shy of his 30th birthday, why aren't we talking about this guy like we are about, Shavkat Rakhmonov or Muhammad Mukayev or somebody?
Topuria.
Well, Ilia Topuria. And it's mostly because Evloev wins straightforward decisions that are only exciting if you like really intricate, like, I can't believe I've said chess matches twice in one show, but you know what I'm talking about. Like, Grundy versus Evloev was only a blast if you love watching good wrestling. Otherwise, it was like, oh yeah, that was that decision thing where they were just flopping all over the place. We should be talking more about this guy, and if my pick is right, we will be on the recap. I got Evloev by decision.
Yeah, if he wins against Arnold Allen, I mean, shit, everyone will be talking about him. I mean, if he beats Arnold Allen, he's going to be 1 or 2 on the Bulls list. I mean, that is as good. And I mean, Arnold Allen, yes, I understand that he recently lost to Max Holloway, but I mean,
if I may interject, he lost to Max Holloway, but one, Max Holloway is one of the greatest fighters of all time.
Yeah,
two, almost nobody is going to be able to look at Max Holloway beating someone and see a blueprint to their own route to victory, but especially not Movsar Evloev.
No.
Like, oh yeah, I'm the 6 foot tall kickboxer. I'm going to do what he did.
Yeah. I mean, Allen. I mean, he's a great athlete. He moves really well, especially laterally. He understands. He's very technically sound. He understands footwork so well. I go back to the Calvin Kattar fight where he was getting Kattar to chase him, and then he was just walking Kattar right into punches. Southpaw, quick hands, accurate, short, tight shots, not many tells. He sets up his shots well with feints. Kind of fights behind a Philly shell defense, which is so rare in MMA. Does well to slide to the pocket and land shots. Throws, his left hand is a hard shot. Now he can be a little too left-hand happy. We saw it against Max Holloway. I mean, there's some of that was, frustration happening, getting pieced up by, one of the best boxers, maybe the best boxer in the history of the UFC. But he'll like to lead with that straight power left. He likes to sidestep to his right to give himself a different angle to land the uppercut, which I like. Because he's putting himself off the center line. He has power. I mean, he knocked out Yusuf, Dan Hooker, Kattar. He's got a sneaky high kick. He is open to leg kicks. I go back to the Sadiq Yusuf fight. Sadiq had a lot of successful leg kicks against him. Very good in exactly what you're saying, in the clinch, being this heavy, strong wrestler, just grinding on him. He got some entries, and he's got some nice entries. And he's got cardio. I mean, despite getting smoked against Max Holloway, I mean, he showed that he's tough. He's going to be going. He's still going to be throwing hard a lot of volume. Evloev, I mean, he's a really well-rounded fighter. On the feet, high output. He's technically sound striker. He's fast hands, good snap on his shots, crisp jab, short, tight power shots. He slips and rips counters and just gets out of range and counters and combinations. I'd say plus power, good kicking game. He's one of these guys. He'll throw a combination and throw a high kick at the end, which I love. He does some stupid spinning attacks, but I'm not a fan of. But you mentioned his wrestling's off the charts. Beautiful entries. I love his reactionary double if being pressured. Very good at timing his opponents to open up with strikes, and then he drops underneath their shots. Incredibly good at winning scrambles. He's not the biggest guy. Even though you look at the line, I think they're close to each other in height, they're close to each other in reach. Obviously, they're gonna be close to each other in weight, but he's not filled out like Arnold Allen. So because of that, he doesn't have the best top control. He also isn't a submission threat, but his takedown defense, he's been taken down. You mentioned Barzola took him down, Grundy took him down, Lenz took him down, but incredible ability to get back up and scramble, and then go back to the Diego Lopez fight. Talk about a guy he was put in some tough positions against a guy that win is really ageable. I know Lopez took such short notice, but was in some crazy scrambles and found ways to get out of some of the worst positions I've seen. This fight is so good. I've really flip-flopped. I'm worried about the intelligence of Arnold Allen, the size of Arnold Allen, but then I'm worried about just the takedowns and the speed and of Evloev and his ability to get people guessing arm striking, arm wrestling. I don't even want to make a pick. I just want to sit back and relax and just enjoy this battle because I think it's good. I think it's going to be a hell of a matchup. I kind of wish this was a fight night main event. We got 5 rounds of it. I thought I was taking an upset. I'm going with Evloev. So obviously he's not the upset. He's the favorite. I wonder how Allen's going to react to getting tagged up and beat up by Holloway. Is how that's going to react. The follow-up fight. Will that beating change him or anything like that? I think both guys are going to have their moments. I think we're going to have a back and forth war. I think we might have some incredible scrambles and moments. I think we got a fight of the year candidate. I just say Evloev gets a couple extra takedowns, a couple more top control. Give me Evloev to win. I'm going to say it's so close. I'll say split decision.
All right, that's 2 for Evloev by decision. And I realize now that I better clarify something before I get massacred in the comments. I mentioned that Allen kind of overcomes his athleticism. Keith just flat out says, he's a very good athlete. I'm not trying to imply that he's a minus athlete. Like he's
British.
not.
He's British. Like there's a limit to his athleticism. Yeah. I mean, when we think about all-time great athletes, we don't think of freaking some British guy.
Yeah, he's like, and he's. I
don't think of Michael Bisping.
Yeah, but at 145, a lot of the great fighters are like otherworldly athletes, like Volkanovski, Ortega, Edson Barboza. And I think against Evloev, he'll probably have a bit of a deficit in just sheer speed and fluidity.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
Allen is not a minus athlete. He is a plus athlete. Thank you. They're going to comment anyway. The next fight on the UFC 297 main card. Well, Keith, let me put it this way. 4 years ago, at the beginning of 2020, if you had stepped out of a time machine and said, all right, at UFC 297 in January of 2024, Chris Curtis and Marc-Andre Barriault will be fighting on a UFC pay-per-view main card, and the winner is probably a top 15 fighter. Yeah, I would have laughed and laughed, and I would have said, you know what, Keith? When you said Chris Curtis, I thought you meant the PFL guy for a minute. So who's this Chris Curtis, and where does he come from?
Yes, at that time, Chris Curtis.
Yeah. At that time, Barriault was fresh off of his 3rd loss in the UFC. He started his UFC run 0-3. Curtis was on a 3-fight losing streak. Most recently, he lost twice and retired twice on the same night in the PFL playoffs. What a turnaround for both these gentlemen. Curtis is 9-2 since then.
And up a weight class for Curtis.
And up a weight class. Yeah, he was doing this at 170 against the Magomed Karamovs of the world. Curtis is 9-2 since then and has become not just an action man, but a fringe contender man in the UFC. Barriault is 5-2 with 1 no contest, and that 1 no contest was him shellacking somebody and having it overturned for PEDs. So 6-2 in the cage. And at least now when you say power bar, you're not just thinking of bad nutrition bars from the 90s. These are 2 of the more unlikely success stories of the last 4 years in the UFC. And here they are at UFC 297. Curtis, 36-year-old Ohio native. He's 30-10 with 1 no contest overall. He is 4-2 with 1 no contest in the UFC. That no contest was in his last fight. He took on Nasruddin Imavov last June at UFC 289. The fairly competitive fight, but middle of the 2nd round, they had a clash of heads that opened a horrible cut on Curtis's eye. He clearly, sincerely wanted to continue. Couldn't see. They stopped the fight. Imavov has gone on to other things since then. Barriault, he is 33-year-old from Quebec. He's 16-6 with 1 no contest overall. He is 5-5 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC as a former TKO middleweight and light heavyweight champ. He's on a 2-fight win streak. He got tapped out a little under a year and a half ago by Anthony Hernandez. Since then, he has back-to-back wins over Julian Marquez and Eric Anders. The most recent of those, the Anders fight, was at UFC 289 last June. In fact, these guys fought on the same card in back-to-back fights, and I probably matched them up on the recap afterwards just because I'm lazy. But hey, I was right. Anyway, he beat Anders last June. Now these 2 meet. Your favorite is -180. Your underdog is +150. Who are they?
I'll say Chris Curtis is the favorite.
You are correct. Curtis, -180. Barriault, +150. I see the dynamic here. Curtis has gone on to surprising success as one of the more undersized 185 pounders in the UFC, and he's done it the hard way. I mean, he's taken on big guys that wanted to take him down, and I mean, he basically pitched a shutout on Rodolfo Vieira in terms of takedown defense. Knocked out Joaquin Buckley, one of the few guys shorter than him in the division. It'll be interesting to see if he can get it done against Barriault, because Barriault, I mean, he's not off the charts huge, but he fights big. He's a big dude that fights heavy, tries to wear down his opponents, make him wear his weight, tries to outlast him. I mean, tell me if you see it that way, and tell me who you think gets their hand raised in this one.
Yeah, this is an interesting fight. I'm actually surprised it's this high up the card. Nothing against these guys. I just,
Dude,
if I'm, you got
who are. I'm surprised that Jourdain is on the prelims, but outside of that, Barriault and Malott are the two best Canadians on the card. I think they just wanted to have some Canadians on the main card.
I just think I would have put Jourdain and Woodson instead of this one, but I mean,
agreed.
Whatever. I'm you know, we're like getting nitpicking over here, but yeah, this should be it should be an action fight. I mean, both guys got power. You know, Chris Curtis, you mentioned, like, he's going to be giving up a lot of size. Former welterweight, you know, he was never like the biggest welterweight to begin with. Yeah, he wasn't small. He was just an average guy. Southpaw, definitely a boxing style. He's a counter striker, does his best in the phone booth. You know, he likes to press forward, get into the pocket, and let that tight, clean boxing go. He loves hooks and uppercuts, rip into the body. You know, we saw that against Rodolfo Vieira, where he butchered Rodolfo Vieira's body. He's a big power punch, especially, you know, when he came in the UFC. I mean, he's been really cracking some guys. He can sometimes not match his opponent's output and give away rounds. And we saw that against Kelvin Gastelum. We saw that against Joaquin Buckley, where he's just like, what is he doing? He's kind of a little bit of that, hey, Masvidal, I'm not getting hurt, you know. The judges understand that, so that's a little bit of an issue. He also does some defensive things, which I don't like. He's like the rolling with punches. It just never looks good. Like, it doesn't hurt him, but it just doesn't look good. You know, the optics aren't good. You know, it just makes it look like he's losing. He's also struggled at times cutting off the cage. Like, that happened against Jack Hermanson. He was able to catch up with Jack Hermanson. He can wrestle, though he almost never looks for a takedown. But if he is, you know, get in that position and he's counter wrestling, you know, he's pretty good on top. He showed some good takedown events against Rodolfo Vieira, and he has the cardio. I mean, he can go hard all 15 minutes, and that's because he really conserves his energy, so he can kind of crack later. Marc-Andre Barriault, guy who fights out of both stances, high volume, presses the action, marches forward, good power, unloads combinations when he gets in the pocket. His straight right being his best blow. Got some mean calf kicks. He wants to be one moving forward. Yeah, he doesn't want to be forced on his back foot like he was against Anthony Hernandez or Young Park. He has a lot of defensive holes, one that he pillars. He will like to use his size. Like you mentioned, he'll get in the clinch, wear there, grind there. He'll also shoot for takedowns, though he isn't a wrestler. He showed some pretty decent takedown defense against Yarko, but he couldn't stop the wrestling of Anthony Hernandez. And I mean, we've talked about this till we're blue in the face about how underrated that guy is. And you know, he couldn't get off bottom, but I wonder if someone like as small as Curtis, if he gets in that position, can hold him down. But he's got good cardio, go all 15 minutes. This is an intriguing matchup. I think the line should be closer. Curtis is in a disadvantage due to just the size he's giving up, and also at times not matching the output. And for a guy, like, when you look at Marc-Andre Barriault, the way he's built and everything, you wouldn't think he's a good, like, cardio guy, but he is. That said, like, they kind of – Andre Barriault has power, but Curtis actually might be the bigger, you know, cracker, the cleaner striker, you know, even though he's a smaller guy. I think both guys got to have their moments. I just think Curtis could get the better of the exchanges. I want to take Curtis by KO, but Andre Barriault is so tough and durable that I think he makes it all the way. Give me Curtis by decision.
Yeah, I see it essentially the same that you do. For a while there, my thoughts were, man, I can't believe Curtis is doing this. Is he actually going to turn into a contender at middleweight? Because it's not going to take much. He came along at the perfect time where
Sean Strickland's the champion.
Sean Strickland's the champion. And before that, Israel Adesanya, before Alex Pereira came around, Israel Adesanya was getting ready to do a third lap around some of these dudes and deciding how vulnerable the current 205-pound champ looked. It was ripe for someone like Chris Curtis to string together 4 wins in a row and make it to a title shot. He didn't quite make it, but man, crushing Brendan Allen has continued to age well. It's a remarkable success story. An interesting thing with Curtis is, and I don't know how much of this is just bad luck or how much is due to his height and his stance and his boxing heavy style, but his last 2 fights have been severely impacted by bad head clashes. Like, you know, the Imavov fight actually ended on it, obviously, but he and Gastelum had a horrible clash of heads that arguably turned the fight. Both ruled inadvertent, but if he's getting the worst of them, that's cold comfort. I just hope that doesn't happen here. And there's every possibility it could, because Curtis is going to want to box in very close range, and Barriault is going to want to close even that short distance and either try to take him down or mash him into the cage. Just please let this fight play out and let the better man win, and let's not, be looking at another clash of heads. Short of something weird like that, though, I do favor Curtis. I think you're right in that even though he's the much smaller man, he's the harder hitter, just due to whatever his natural gifts happen to be and just good, tight technique. Barriault is extremely durable. The only time I can remember him being stopped on, strikes is Chidi and Jokawani, who he's going to do that to people just every once in a while. I'm leaning Curtis by decision here. I think it's going to be a super fun fight. And when I say, Barriault is kind of a grinder and wants to wear people down against the cage, that makes it sound boring. And most fighters who fight that way can be a little boring. But for some reason, it just isn't the case for Barriault. So I think this is going to be a fun fight, whichever way it goes. But I do lean on Curtis. It boils down to who's able to manage distance. Both guys have good cardio. Both guys are reasonably sound defensively. Both guys have good offensive weapons. If Curtis can keep this in middle boxing range, that stands to benefit him. If Barriault can constantly either collapse the pocket and get his hands on Curtis or force Curtis to move backwards to avoid that favors Barriault. I'm leaning Curtis here, but wouldn't be shocked by the upset. And the only thing that would really surprise me is if this fight sucks. Third from the top at UFC 297 is a welterweight matchup between Neil Magny and Mike Malott. Magny, the 36-year-old Haitian American, is 28-11 overall. He is 21-10 since joining the UFC out of the 16th season of The Ultimate Fighter. He is coming into this fight off a loss. In fact, he has alternated wins and losses for the last 2 years now. He faced Ian Gary at UFC 292 last August, dropping a unanimous decision. Prior to that, he had won a decision over Phil Rowe back in June. He'll look to get back into the win column here against Malott. 32-year-old Haligonian is 10-1-1 overall. He is 3-0 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought most recently in June at UFC 289, where he tapped out Adam Fugit in the second round with a guillotine choke. Odds here favor Malott pretty substantially. He is minus 350, Magny plus 275. Keith, when I talk about Neil Magny, it sounds like a welterweight version of the things I find myself saying about Clay Guida, where stylistically he is basically the same fighter he always was. He remains a tough out for all but the very best of the best, but things are clearly sliding. They're clearly in decline. Magny did not have a meteoric rise, obviously. There wasn't much on there wasn't much on Dana White's on Tough 16 to make you think he was going to be easily the most accomplished member of that cast. Just, he put his hard hat on. If he learned one thing on Tough, it was, I like fighting every other week. And he basically very, very quietly made his way up the welterweight rankings just by fighting 4 or 5 times a year, being surprisingly effective. And because it was such a slow build, I really didn't change my overall thoughts about him until he was kind of knocking on the doorstep of the top 10 and he was beating very good fighters. And then it was like, well, how long can he keep doing this? Well, he's hit the apex, and his descent has been almost as slow as his rise was. The wheels haven't all fallen off at all. Even now, like who's he lost to in the last couple of years? Shavkat Rakhmonov, possible future champ.
Yeah.
Gilbert Burns, longtime top 5 guy. Ian Gary, all the drama aside, stud. Yeah. And the others, he's beating good people. He's less than 3 years removed from definitively beating Jeff Neal, who's been a top 10 guy. Danny Rodriguez, Phil Rowe, they're not bad fighters. Like nobody likes to be called a gatekeeper, but even now in the decline of his career and at 36, Magny is still a good test of whether you're a top 15 type guy or not. That makes this a perfect matchup. I just talked in our last clip about how weird it is that Chris Curtis and Marc-Andre Barriault are main card pay-per-view guys and fringe contenders. If you came to me 4 years ago and said, hey, Mike Malott is going to be fighting at welterweight and he's going to be knocking on the doorstep of the top 20, maybe top 15, I would have laughed at you. I'd have been like, the featherweight, like that really skinny dude that got pieced up by Hakeem Dawodu. Like, give me a break. Malott's never making it to the UFC. He disappeared for a couple of years, and I'm casting no aspersions, no accusations. I'm not saying he found the last trove of pride vitamins, but he had one little transitional fight at middleweight, and then he showed up at welterweight about 2 years from his last fight at featherweight, looking like he never could have made 145 in the first place. He is a big, strong dude at 170.
Yeah.
The only fighter, and this is going to be kind of a deep cut, you'll definitely get it, but most of our viewers not. It reminds me of Micah Miller. Like where Micah Miller, Cole Miller, little brother was a huge dude who just, went from 145 to 185 in 6 months. That's Malott, and Malott's 32, but feels younger. And there are a couple reasons. One, because he still feels like he's developing skills wise. Two, because he's got 12 professional fights. He had that long layoff. So even though he's 32, he still has the feeling of an up and comer, somebody whose best days are probably ahead of him in this division. And that's why I like this fight. Magny, the definition of a well-rounded guy, we've said to exhaustion, he doesn't look like he should be as good a wrestler as he is. That's starting to slip a little bit. Like it used to be remarkable how good he was as an opportunistic offensive wrestler and had surprisingly good takedown defense for such a tall, skinny guy. That's starting to slip a little bit. Guys below the top level are starting to really be able to challenge his takedown defense. Surprisingly good power. He's just a grinder. The perfect Neil Magny fight, the entire thing takes place outside of that octagon-shaped warning track. The entire fight takes place like within 3 feet of the fence, where he's just making life miserable for his opponents. Here, Malott's a massive favorite. I don't know if he should be this massive a favorite, because you know what? If he comes out and Magny starts piecing him up with the jab and long kicks, and we find out that Malott can't take Magny down, that he's not Shavkat Rakhmonov or Gilbert Burns from that standpoint, it's going to be a long night for Malott. Like I see upset potential here. I don't think Magny is washed, but if Malott is evolving, like continuing to evolve like he is, I think he's got faster hands and feet, more power. I think he is a good enough wrestler to get Magny to the ground and may just be able to brute force takedowns where Magny is doing everything right against the fence, like wide legging, got the underhook, and Malott just hoists him and dumps him anyway. So give me Malott to get over in a big way here with the best name win of his UFC run so far. Malott by surprisingly one-sided decision for me.
Oh man, this is a crowd favorite fight. I mean, Malott is definitely the guy that the UFC loves. But he's got a tough test. I mean, Neil Magny, I mean, we know what we got with Neil Magny at this point. I mean, my notes haven't really changed other than like his skills with a couple of down arrows. Like, I agree with you saying they're going down. Like, he's always been a volume striker who gets stronger as the run goes on. But, I mean, his output in the last couple of fights has dropped. I think his speed has kind of dropped. We saw that against Danny Rodriguez, Rachmanov, Max Griffin. He really struggled with the speed and time of Ian Gary. But again, a lot of studs we just named. And some of those fights he got wins. So he's a long and lengthy fighter that, you know, he likes to pop shot from range. He's got a crisp jab. Doesn't really load up, not a lot of tells. He loves teep kicks and calf kicks, step in knees, or, you know, kind of thing that he's so good at. Defensively, he's always had all. He pulls his head straight back. He keeps it on the center line. But what he's good at when his opponent gets in punching range, he's smart enough to kind of grab and initiate the clinch, grind in there, win those positions, batter with knees and elbows inside, just make it frustrating. He's also good at just kind of hitting like a slide by in close. He did it to Danny Rodriguez a few times. Underrated offensive wrestler. Good. I mean, I agree that his wrestling is still slipping, but if he still took like Danny Rodriguez down 5 times not that long ago, relentless with the mat returns, but he has struggles to get people off him if they take him down. Rachmanov, Gilbert Burns, RDA, all took him down. You got to worry about the damage he's taken over the years. I mean, the guy's 36 years old. He's really, could fall apart at any time. Malat, on the other hand, he's looked really good. He's got a lot of hype. I'm not completely sold on him yet, though. Like, this fight is the one that's going to tell a lot about him. Going, pay-per-view main card in Canada against the biggest name he's going against. He's a good athlete. He's nice footwork. He works behind a jab, does good to double up, good power. He can overthrow his shots a little bit, and he doesn't move his head that much. I mean, I've seen him get cracked a lot. As far as wrestling, solid entries. He has 5 submission wins. Got a submission in his last fight. He's got a great guillotine. When we talk about the prospects or kind of like the new guys on the scene in welterweight, it's like the funnest division right now in that sense. When I think about those guys, Ian Gary, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Sean Brady, Jack Della Maddalena, Michael Morales, Mike Malott is in that group. But right now, he's probably the last of that group on my list. I mean, in fairness, he's faced the lowest competition of those guys. I mean, 3 fights ago, he was fighting Mickey Gall. So despite Magny showing huge signs of decline, this is still a huge step up in competition for him. I'm going to say Magny ruins the plans. I say he closes the distance. I say he grinds on Malott, and I think he wears Malott down. I say he gets a few takedowns. I'm going to say the old man still got one left in him. I say Magny wins a split decision.
All right. If you are familiar at all with the Shillan and Duffy previews, probably once per episode, you will hear us disagree and hear me say either Keith is right on this one, or I hope Keith is right on this one. The sentimental guy in me, I hope Keith is right on this one. If you don't love Neil Magny, something's wrong with you. He is absolutely awesome. Very, very good fighter, underratedly good fighter, and generally speaking, the picture of class. And I would not be sad to be talking about what's next for a victorious Neil Magny on Saturday night on our recap. But for the record, I have Malott in this one. With that, we arrive at the co-main event of UFC 297 for the vacant women's bantamweight title. It is former title challenger Raquel Pennington against rising contender Mayra Bueno Silva. Pennington, the 35-year-old Colorado native, is 15-8 overall. She is 12-5 in the UFC. She is, as I mentioned, a former UFC bantamweight title challenger. Most famously faced Amanda Nunes in May of 2018, went down via 5th round TKO after one of the worst beatdowns in UFC history. One of the ones where controversy abounded afterwards over whether the referee and or her corner should have stopped the fight sooner than they did. But since that loss, she's been on a good run. She's on a 5-fight win streak. She fought just once last year, and it was almost exactly a year ago, taking a split decision over Ketlen Vieira at UFC Fight Night Strickland versus Imavov. She'll look to make it 6 in a row, and the 6th one would, of course, be the biggest win of her career against Silva. 32-year-old Brazilian is 10-2-1 with 1 no contest overall. She is 5-2-1 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series Brazil. This would be the time when I make my obligatory trivia footnote that she is the first fighter ever signed out of Dana White's Contender Series Brazil. She is coming off of a no contest in her most recent fight. She fought twice last year, tapped out Lena Landsberg in February, came back in July in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 49, and guillotined Holly Holm in the second round, only to have it overturned for PEDs. Despite that, she gets the title shot here, and the line is close. Your favorite is -160. Your underdog is +130. Who are they, Keith?
I think Bueno Silva is a favorite.
You're correct. Mayra Bueno Silva is your favorite. I'm going to make 2 observations here and tell me whether you agree or not. The knee-jerk reaction, I think, for a lot of fans, and even for me, when I heard about this fight being made for the vacant title, were, really, Raquel Pennington? That's the best you can do? Because my impression of her is frozen in time 5 years ago, where she got absolutely pasted by Amanda Nunes. But the more I thought about it, and once I really started digging, I'm like, yeah, Raquel Pennington is the best we can do. And you name me another contender in that division, and Pennington's already beaten her. Ketlen Vieira, Macy Chasson, Pani Kianzad, Irene Aldana.
Yeah. Raquel Pennington is like when you come home from work after a long day and you're hungry and you're like, oh man, I wonder what my wife is cooking. And you're like, you're really excited. And it's like, oh, maybe like it's a steak. And then, that's Amanda Nunes. And then you're like, oh, it's probably not a steak. It's a Tuesday night. Okay. Maybe lasagna, that's I don't know. That's Misha Tate or Holly Holm, or I don't know. She's like pork chops. You're like, yeah, I like pork chops, but no one's excited to eat pork chops. No one's like comes home. No one's gets home and you're like, oh man, I'm so glad at this pork chops. You're like, oh, okay.
I feel like there's some joke to be made here about like Tisha Torres coming home from work and seeing what Raquel Pennington's made for dinner, but I don't have the brain power to make it right now.
Yeah, but that's what she's good.
She's good, and she's the quintessential problem fighter. Even if the UFC has other ideas about who they'd like to take the division into the post-Nunes era, and for the record, Dana White has always obviously really liked Pennington, so there may not be another, but you name who it is, and Pennington's going to, I don't know.
She's not good. Like, she's not exciting. I mean, she's good. No, it's not. She's a good fighter, but she's not exciting. She's not a personality.
This is like, if on one end of the spectrum is Dana White wearing a Korean Zombie t-shirt in public after KZ's like second UFC fight, Pennington is the opposite of that. Nobody knows why Dana likes her. Like, she's a good grindy fighter who's openly lesbian, but he does, and I'm okay with it. So Pennington, the knee-jerk reaction is really, and I'm like, yeah, really. On the flip side of it, I'm going to ask you, Mayra Bueno Silva, I ran down the whole thing. She's 5-2-1 with 1 no contest in the UFC. What I didn't mention is she started at flyweight. She moved up after losing to Manon Fior. I think she realized, she saw the writing on the wall at flyweight. She's like, okay, I'm never getting past that chick.
Yeah.
Since moving up to bantamweight, she's beaten Wu Yanan, Stephanie Egger, and Lena Landsberg, and she had a win over Holly Holm.
That's pretty bad.
Overturned, and she was losing the Holm until Holm shot into a guillotine.
Yeah.
Where, like, does she rank for you? And if so, where would she rank for you on like the worst UFC title challengers ever?
Oh,
like outside of ones that were made on last minute notice because of an injury or something.
like Joe Soto getting a title shot. I don't think it's that bad because one, you got to take you got to take everything in perspective. It's women's bantamweight, so it's never been a strong division. So like you can't compare it to a men's bantamweight getting a title shot or something like that, or men's lightweight. It really depends on how you look at Holly Holm. If you take the Holly Holm fight out, it's a no contest, doesn't count. Pretend it never happened, then it's one of the worst. You don't go beat Lena Landsberg and then you get a title shot. But it's like it's like when someone's like testifying in court and they say something they're not supposed to, like talk about a previous conviction, and they're like, "I object, Your Honor," and like the judge like, "Yep, strike that from your record," and like all the jurors was like magically forget about that. Like, oh, you mean this guy who's up for child molestation has been previously convicted of a child molestation? Yeah, I didn't hear that. And then I'll do like they don't strike the jury and start all over. So if you count her, Holly Holm, yeah, I mean, she just beat Holly Holm. I mean, yeah, was it the best victory? Was it not? But she submitted Holly Holm. Which,
and if Holm had beaten her, this would be Holm versus Pennington right now. So I guess she comes by fair and square.
Yeah, Holm would be the third time they fight or something like that.
Yeah.
And then when you think about like Justin Eilers getting a UFC heavyweight title shot off a loss, or people winning the Ultimate Fighter show, and I mean, obviously,
or Yoel Romero off of missing weight in his previous fight.
Yeah. Matt Serra, he won, so that's not the best example, but like winning a controversial decision against Chris Lytle.
And if he lost to St. Pierre by any way, even if he'd done a Rocky one and like valiantly fought in a loss, he would still go down as, dude, that was the worst title challenger of all time. This blown up,
getting title shot. So I don't think it's that bad. I mean, she's the favorite. She's supposed to, but she's supposed to win.
Yeah, she's the favorite and she's supposed to win. But here's my little secret: I don't think she does. There's a possibility that Pennington has fallen off. She's 35, but I think of women's bantamweight as being like men's light heavyweight, where 35 is not old, and the division has usually had a few stars at the top and actually been super, super weak beneath the top five. Like the parallels stand out there. Unless Pennington has really fallen off at 35, and it's possible, she has a lot of cage time. She's taken some beatings, but if she hasn't, I think she's kind of tailor-made to give Mayra Bueno Silva a miserable night. Holm was doing Holly Holm things to Silva again until she shot into a guillotine. But Holm's whole last act of her career has been about her realizing that, hey, you know what? I'm a great athlete. I'm strong as hell, and I've now been a mixed martial artist a lot longer than I was a boxer. I'm just going to start wrestling these hoes, and it would. I just got fired. And
the new senior editor at ClearDog.com, Keith Shillan here.
If Holly Holm can do the Holly Holm thing to Mayra Bueno Silva, I think Pennington can do the Pennington thing. She is she's a grinder. Like she's a decent boxer, as always limited by her lack of athleticism, but decent technique, okay power, good volume, good and the cardio to carry it for 3 or 5 rounds, but excels grinding in the clinch, even against women that shouldn't work against. Like Pennington isn't huge, and there have been women who looked bigger and stronger than her that she just kind of bullied around. I mean, in a row, Chasson, Ladd, and Vieira all look bigger and stronger than Pennington, and she just gave them all a miserable time. I could see her doing that to Mayra Bueno Silva. Silva, despite being a former flyweight, immediately just kind of blew up into a good-sized bantamweight, but I don't think she's going to be able to keep Pennington off her. I think Pennington is probably going to be the one who's building and growing stronger as the fight goes along. It's not going to be super exciting, but I think Pennington wins here. I think she probably wins by like sweeping the last 4 rounds or something. And just especially if the booth is like Rogan and DC, they'll be getting into like side conversations and historical, stuff and joking and riffing, kind of like when Keith and I are talking about a fight that's boring to think about. This one might be boring to watch, but I don't think there's going to be any question at the end. Give me Pennington in the mild upset here.
Wow. Before I give my prediction, whether Bueno Silva deserves this or not, let me ask you this question: is there a least intriguing title fight in recent, like what's worse, something that you're least interested in for a title shot than this one?
Oh, that's a really good question. If I may, I'll sort of start to digest that. Well,
Okay, all right, I'll talk and see if you
Yeah.
I can't think of one that I'm least interested in this one, and this is no shot against. I mean, no, yeah, it is. This is a shot against the whole division, and when the news has left, the whole division is like whatever. You have like washed up, no, I don't want to washed up, but really old people, fighters like Misha Tate and Holly Holm. You got the, your Raquel Penningtons that were good, but always like the next tier down. There's no like prospects. You're like, oh, here's the person. It's just a tough division. Raquel Pennington, she's always been this like flat-footed minus athlete, kind of slow, but can kind of just take a beat and press the action. She's a builder that keeps getting stronger as the fight goes on. She's a technical boxer who likes to work in the pocket with her left hook always being her best blow. She loves that dipping to her right, left hook over the top. But her game, and it's always been this way, but it's even more now, is just battling the close quarters. She wants to get to the clinch. It's an ideal for her to just press her opponent against the cage, their back against the cage, and just wear on them. She'll occasionally drop down to the hips, look for a takedown. Has solid takedown defense, especially if you drop down on her. She loves like a standing guillotine. She's got one of the best in the game of that. If she's taken down, she works well to get back to her feet. She has a little bit of a submission threat, and she has the cardio. I mean, she's not going to tire down. She'll have the natural tire of a match, but she's like she won't gas. Biano Silva, also not a great athlete. She's a Muay Thai striker on the feet, fights out of both stances. She's aggressive, pocket boxer, gets inside with tight boxing, throws combinations, has good power, but she can load up a little too much. She throws out some spinning attacks. She likes teep kicks, strong Muay Thai clinch. Not a great wrestler. Like, she struggles to get the fight to the ground, but she is a submission artist. I mean, she caught Holly Holm with a beautiful ninja choke. She armbarred Stephanie Edgar. She's a weak defensive wrestler. If you try to take her down, I mean, Marna Moroz took her down a lot in that fight. I don't have a strong read on this fight. If one fighter runs through the other one, and there's an early stoppage or, then I think Biano Silva won. She caught Pennington. She landed big stuff on the feet. Pennington's, shot kind of thing. I mean, she's almost winning streaks. I'm not saying I don't expect her to be shot, but I'm just saying, like, based on how long she's been in the UFC. The deeper the fight goes on, though, I think it starts favoring Pennington, especially if she gets inside. I think Pennington's going to do exactly what you said. I think she's going to control the fight. I think she's going to get inside. I think she's going to wear on Biano Silva. I think she's going to get a takedown. I think she's going to hold Biano Silva down. I don't think it'd be best for her to get takedowns. I think it'd be best for her she actually just worked the clinch and dirty boxed and pressed and kind of kept it in the pocket boxing range and pocket boxing and then clinch, pocket boxing and then clinch. I think this fight's going to suck. It's a long time coming. I can't believe I'm doing this, but I think Pennington gets it done. Give me Raquel Pennington to become UFC champion. Give me Pennington by split decision.
And new. The only less appealing title fights within any kind of recent memory that I can think of are both also in women's divisions. The inaugural women's flyweight title fight that ended up being Nico Montano versus Marc-Andre Modafferi was like next level bad. And then Nunes versus Felicia Spencer featherweight.
Yeah, the only thing you still had Nunes. True. And at that time, Nico Montano had a little bit of buzz. Like, we didn't know what we had with her. We thought she could be exciting. So yeah, I'm still putting this number one.
Yeah, this one's rough.
Like, I just imagine the press conference, this week, and they're asking questions and like, Jose Youngs and Oscar Willis, the usual people. They ask one or two questions of Strickland and Duplessis, and they're just like, those guys are professionals, so they're like, all right, we kind of have to ask for Raquel Pennington, but like, no one's going there like happy to ask a question. Like, there's not gonna be a lot of questions for those two. Anyways,
That brings us to the main event of the UFC's first pay-per-view of 2024, a middleweight title fight between defending champ Sean Strickland and challenger Dricus du Plessis. Strickland, the 32-year-old American, is 28-5 overall. He is 15-5 in the UFC. He is 8-2 since moving up from welterweight. And he is on a 3-fight win streak that, of course, included his shocking capture of the UFC middleweight title in his most recent appearance in the headliner of UFC 293 last September, where he took a dominant unanimous decision over Israel Adesanya to become the new champ. He will look to mount his first defense against du Plessis, who, but for an untimely injury, this fight might have been exactly reversed with du Plessis as the defending champ. 30-year-old South African is 20-2 overall. He's a perfect 6-0 since joining the UFC as a former welterweight champ in KSW and a former middleweight and welterweight champ in Africa's EFC promotion. He fought most recently last July at UFC 290, knocking out former champ Robert Whittaker in the first round. He had been scheduled to challenge Adesanya in September. He was injured. He withdrew. Strickland stepped up on relatively short notice and landed Sherdog's biggest upset of 2023. Now we get this fight that we might have gotten anyway. Keith, your favorite is -140. Your underdog is +115. It's a very close line. It's close to a pick 'em.
Yeah.
Who are they?
Oof. Oh, man. I mean, they're both coming off their best victories. I'm going to say du Plessis is the favorite.
Your favorite is Sean Strickland, -140. Du Plessis available just above even money, +110. First off, this show is for entertainment value only. We say at least once per show. We're not a betting show.
I didn't know the lines.
Yeah. But especially in this case, I am historically terrible at picking both of these guys' fights. So if you are the kind of degenerate that just has to have betting advice, listen to Keith. Don't listen to me.
I didn't know the betting line. So
here's the thing. These guys are both former welterweights. And in the case of du Plessis in particular, it's hard to picture. We just recently talked about Mike Malott being a former featherweight and how that just seems ridiculous now because he's got so much muscle on his frame. He just looks like he never could have been that small. Like du Plessis, he's not the biggest middleweight, but he's big. He's big in that kind of, like, you would never look at Marvin Vettori and be like, oh, that I bet that guy used to weigh 170. No, he's just a big, thick, 6'1" guy with big muscles. Who he's clearly into his muscles, so you can't picture him ever being like smaller. That's du Plessis. And
Marvin Vettori was born in high school. Like,
yeah.
Marvin Vettori never watched like Sesame Street in his life, like, or Barney or anything like that. He was just born.
Yeah, he
like arm wrestling somebody in the back of a math class.
Yeah, he started shaving in kindergarten. Like, yeah, he's du Plessis got a little of that. And if you look at his his fights like in EFC and KSW, he's always been a big dude. When he was at welterweight, it was by sucking out too much. He's something like 19-1 in his last 20 fights, and his one loss, he and Roberto Soldic, you know, had a fantastic barn burner rivalry going in KSW. There's no shame there. Soldic is one of the best fighters in that weight range outside of North American promotions. But even in those fights, du Plessis looked like bigger than Soldic in some kind of way. I really underestimated him coming to the UFC. Like, I've been too dismissive of EFC because as late as like 2010, EFC was awful. Yeah, it was the best promotion in like sub-Saharan Africa, but it was bad. It was sending the UFC people like Ruin Potts that would just, you know, lose 2 fights by 90-second knockout and we're gone. It's a different story now. But more importantly, du Plessis, he has next level physical gifts. He's one of the more athletic guys in the division, like really explosive, tons of power on his strikes. And while he can overswing sometimes, he doesn't have to. He's the kind of guy that he has power and everything just because he is that big, that fast, that fluid. He is one of those fighters that is a surprisingly effective wrestler just on his athleticism, speed, and power. He doesn't have fantastic technique, but just manages to haul people to the ground by overwhelming them. And he's not been pushed around even by some of the biggest, strongest dudes in the division, like Derek Brunson. Here, again, Strickland is coming into this fight off of a massive upset, the biggest upset of 2023. And the most shocking thing about it all was how non-shocking it seemed by the time he was done. Like, it was one of those fights where if you show somebody who'd never watched MMA before, you would have had a hard time convincing that Strickland was like a 6-1 underdog, just because who would have predicted that somebody was going to beat Israel Adesanya with nothing but a 1-2 walking forward and not even trying for takedowns?
It's like still one of the weirdest fights I can remember.
It's one of the weirdest fights we can remember. Jury is out on whether he just has Israel Adesanya's number or there was some other extenuating circumstance going on, but that's not going to beat Dricus du Plessis. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, Dricus du Plessis is not going to stand there and get jabbed up and 1-2'd at range for 5 rounds or even 3 or even 1.5. I mean, he may go down in flames, but I think he's going to come at Strickland with aggression. I hate straying into intangibles here, but they kind of matter. Like, I don't think du Plessis is going to be wowed by the occasion. I don't think he's going to be nervous here. I don't think he's going to be tentative. He thinks he deserved to be here several fights ago. Like, he's got a lot of bluster, but it's not putting on the show. It's not like, Colby Covington or Chael Sonnen, like turning that little switch and like, okay, I'm in presser mode now. I have the feeling that Dricus du Plessis is a dick all the time. And I mean that as a borderline compliment. I think he's going to come right at Strickland and be like, okay, what have you got? Like, are you going to try to beat me with the limited repertoire that somehow worked on Adesanya? 5 years ago, like before his bad motorcycle or car accident, Strickland's wrestling was underrated and underused. Like, he was a surprisingly good wrestler, and he kind of had that in his back pocket during his welterweight run. I kept on thinking he had that at 185. He has been so reluctant to use it that I think I was wrong. I think he can't do that anymore. I think the injuries may have taken that away from him. Maybe just age. It's harder to drop levels and shoot a good double from the outside when you're older and 15 or 20 pounds heavier. He may not have that anymore. His defensive wrestling, man, I think Dricus du Plessis is going to be able to get in on Strickland, pick him up and slam him down if he wants to. And I think the exchanges on the feet are going to be such that even if Strickland outlands du Plessis 2-1 or 3-1, du Plessis is going to land with such superior power that it's going to look like he's winning the striking. Again, I'm terrible at picking Sean Strickland fights. I'm terrible at picking Dricus du Plessis fights. But we've seen it from du Plessis before. He was getting kind of picked apart by Trevin Giles, and then the difference in power started to tell. Like, Giles, who is a good boxer and a big 170, like probably a good preview of 185, like was kind of piecing him up, probably outlanded him 2-1 in the first round. And in the second round, it took du Plessis about 3 punches to make that entirely meaningless. Strickland is better than Giles, but he's better at a lot of the same things. I could see that same kind of thing happening here. I think we're going to have a new champ. I think I'm going to say du Plessis knocks Strickland out in the third round. And whether he hurts him on the feet, falls into the ground, and then is just a mashing, or we get some sort of highlight reel thing where he just lamps him standing. Give me and new. And whether you like Dricus du Plessis, you find him amusing, you hate him, the volume's going to be turned up to 11 for the foreseeable future, because a lot of people are going to want a piece, and he's going to have something to say to each and every single one of them. So tune in.
The question is, if he wins and Adesanya is really sitting on the shelf, I mean, this is more for a recap, but I mean, who's next in that division? There's no one really like out in front of the pack. But I mean, that's we can talk about that in the recap show. So, yeah, man, this is an intriguing fight. I'm glad the betting line is as close as it is because to me, you seem very confident in Duplessis, and I'm not confident either way.
Well, I'm confident in the sense of confident that I said it really loud, but I also said like 3 times that I'm terrible at picking these guys' fights. So yeah. I'm hedging a little bit.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, we know what we got with Sean Strickland. I mean, he's a striker.
Brendan Allen is next for whoever, if
it might be.
Adesanya isn't available.
Yeah, it might be. I mean, you know, it could be is Hazmat Shemaev.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Hamzat will say a few things and they'll slide him right in, especially since he's back on the I've been really sick thing that made him like fake retire a couple of years ago. That might be it. But I mean, especially if it's Strickland and he and Allen have that first fight.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Now, why are we recapping this already? I'm sorry. You go ahead. You go ahead and give the preview. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, Strickland is so hard to read because even some wins, they're not the most impressive. Like the Abbas Magomedov win, like, yeah, he was kind of losing, and then he just finally was like, hey, maybe I should like turn up the volume. And then he has a brilliant showing against Israel Adesanya, but I still like, was it a brilliant showing or was it Adesanya was checked out? He just seems so flat and so, I mean, just so different. Mm-hmm. You know, Strickland's a striker that just marches down his foe. One thing I like, he's very relaxed, technically sound striker. He starts off a little slow, and some of that's setting traps and stuff. But when he picks up the pace and starts moving forward and letting his hands go, and he starts talking, I think we could have some of that in this fight. If you're him saying, you know, yelling at Dricus, you know, and stuff. But to his credit, he started much faster against Adesanya. No, I mean, I think it was late in the first round when he dropped Adesanya.
It was late in the first round, yes.
Yeah, but it wasn't like the most blistering pace. But yeah, his jab is whole world. I mean, he's got one of the best jabs in MMA. He follows it with straight punches down the pipe. He keeps everything tight. He doesn't overextend on his shots. Not many tells. He will admit that he's a point fighter. He'll admit that he's like, oh, I hit like a bitch. But to his credit, he did drop Adesanya, so maybe he's coming into his power. I mean, he's 32, so that would be a little surprising. But you know, with those small gloves, you know, it could be. But I'm still kind of believing that might be a little bit more Adesanya looking terrible. I hope he'd throw more kicks. He's got a good kicking game. He didn't throw any kicks against Adesanya, but he's got hard kicks to the body, hard kicks to the legs. Though he is open because that boxing style, you know, when he's heavy on his front foot, he's open at leg kicks himself, something that Duplessis will do a lot. If he closes distance on, he will battle in the clinch. He doesn't wrestle. You know, the only fight that he really, really wrestled since his return to UFC was Uriah Hall fight. He took him down 4 times, but he got a couple takedowns here and there. You know, he's more of a sprawl and brawl kind of guy for his takedown defense. Doesn't get tired because he's just, you know, slightly working. You know, he's that guy that he's not doing, you know, speed limit 65. He's doing 75. He's not getting pulled over. Mm-hmm. And it just works for him. Duplessis, man, I wasn't sold on Duplessis, you know, on his rise up to UFC. You talk about you having bad picks. I keep picking against him, and his performance against Robert Whitaker, it's hard to doubt him anymore. I mean, it was a great performance. He's looked better and better in fights. He fights out of both stances. I've said this before about him. He's got really deceivingly long arms where his opponents think they're out of range and he still hits. He's an action fighter. He's going to press the action. He's going to throw a lot. He's a pressure counter striker with high volume, attacks with combination, plus power. I mean, he's got 4 KOs already in the UFC, 9 in total. So I should probably say good power. Though he can load up a little bit. He can kind of telegraph some of his shots. He'll occasionally throw out some spinning attacks. Good calf kicks. I think something that he could be successful against Sean Strickland is that the problem, and this is the one thing I've always had with Duplessis, is his defensive holes. He backs straight ups. He avoids shots by pillaring. Doesn't move his head that well. He hates being pressured back. He's been hurt in a lot of his fights, even fights that he was dominating. I mean, think about the end of that Darren Till fight where he was like holding on to a victory against like a shot, like, somewhat shot Darren Till. Now he's an opportunist wrestler. Like those, he's got 10 takedowns in 6 UFC fights. Now 6 of those came against Darren Till, but he still got takedowns against Robert Whitaker and Derek Brunson. Those are good. And if he gets on top, he's got mean ground and pound. He's a submission. He has 10 subs. I don't expect him to get a submission against Strickland, but I can see him like take him down and beat him up. This is good. I do think on the feet. I agree with you what you're saying. Like, Duplessis has more like variations, in his striking. He's, stepping knees and spinning attacks and hooks and high kicks and calf kicks. And he definitely has more power. But Strickland's the cleanup boxer. If Strickland can get in his face and make this strictly a boxing match, or just, I think he's got the advantage in the hand speed. I think he's more accurate. Definitely more defensive sound. Strickland's good at rolling with punches and deflecting punches. Doesn't really get hurt. I mean, obviously the Alex Pereira walk right into a left hook. Yeah, but that's a once in a lifetime guy. I mean, Alex Pereira can freaking knock out a dinosaur. The fight is hard to pick in the line, but how the fight goes down, I don't think it's hard to pick. I think it really depends on the feet. Now, again, I agree with you. If this is a grappling battle, I definitely favor Duplessis. Not that I think he's a better. I don't. He's a good wrestler. Like, he's opportunistic. He's willing to go to it. Well, I don't know. Strickland's definitely. I don't expect him to go for takedowns. If he's on top or something like that, it's defensive wrestling. Like, scramble happen. But on the feet, to me, it really is who's pressing the action, who's moving forward. I mean, Strickland wants to march down Duplessis, get him to fight off his back foot, while Duplessis wants to press the action, make it a brawl, close the distance, get on top, get some takedowns. I've really flip-flopped. If there's a big knockout or something, it should be Duplessis. If there's a big ground and pound, if someone destroys a guy, it's Duplessis. I do believe that Strickland is kind of keeping the belt warm for the next middleweight guy. Now, I'm a big Bo Nickel guy, so but I'm trying to be realistic, like Chimaev or somebody else. So if you ask me which of these two guys could have a bigger title run, it would be Duplessis. It's just, can Duplessis beat Strickland right now? I'm torn, man. The one thing about Duplessis I don't like is how hittable he is. Darren Till was tagging him up. You mentioned the Trevin Giles fight. That was a fight that Trevin Giles was winning until he got caught. And he was winning with a jab and straight punches down the pipe. And that wasn't that long ago. But Strickland's also had some bad performances. Again, I flip-flop back and forth. I think Duplessis is going to have a lot of success early. I just think there's going to be a moment where I think he's going to get mad, start talking, start yelling at him, calling him a bitch, starts marching forward. And I think he's just piecing up with jabs and combinations. And I think Duplessis shoots a takedown in the third and Strickland actually stuffs it now. And then, then he's starting to turn up the volume. And I think it's going to be Duplessis early, and I think it's going to be Strickland late. And I think Strickland's going to win a really close fight. I'm going to say Strickland wins a split decision.
All right. We have a little bit more disagreement here. Both of us acknowledging that there's some uncertainty here. Can't wait for this one. That's it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 297, Strickland versus Duplessis, which goes down this Saturday, the 20th at Scotiabank Arena in Toronto. I've been Ben. He has been Keith. If this is your first time listening or watching, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We're pretty business-like this time. Normally, there's a little more trivia / story time / general goofiness, but we tried to do our best to sprinkle that in around some of the deepest analysis you will find anywhere. Please do give us a like, a follow, leave us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We love to hear from you. If you think we're completely out on a limb on some of these picks, you might be right. Tell us, and we will give you all your flowers. Most importantly, join us for the recap. We will be live on the Sherdog YouTube page about 10 minutes after the main event, as we always are. Keith takes the captain's chair. We'll talk about all 12 of these fights in reverse order, from the 2 title fights all the way down to the heavily Canadian undercard, talking about what's good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. Talking about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers, and talking with you, because the live chat is open that whole time. So we are taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we would love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy these fights.
It's dragging it down.